being like a progressive or left-leaning person, for the most part, or for pretty much everything that I'm aware of, the evidence and the research seems to be on our position seems to accommodate the evidence in the literature in a positive way, right? We can work within those. However, when you're having a debate with somebody that's confrontational to you, just being like appealing to, well, this is what has the best outcomes. This is what shows up best. This is what the studies say works. While you're correct and that's true, that's not the best argument to make in the situation. I think in these situations, you need to do two things. You need to, number one...
one of the main issues is really, it's not really an inclusion issue, it's really an anti-straight issue going on, especially in the classroom. For example, I saw this chart that was given out to elementary school kids where it's a 0 and it's straight, and then it's 10 to you're gay. And as you go up and up the chart, it gets more rainbow. So having students be psychologically be attracted to color and not gray, do you think it really...
I love these questions.
Yeah, I think that's more of a lack of participation in the ideology, not imposing a new one on the kid.
How about they...
Wait, no, it's not lack of participation. It's one idea. See, this is the key issue. People think the status quo is free of normativity.
Have we considered that this might be motivated by drug companies just looking for more business?
I can't do it, dude. Next week, I will actually be hosting a debate, moderating a debate between Not So Erudite, I hope that's how I pronounce that, and Jangles ScienceLad on the topic of transport. And before that, we're actually going to watch Jangles' panel on transports at the Better Discourse conference. And we're going to be going over that and basically giving feedback and just doing a debate analysis of how this is going on. I think this is I have done a review of like an in-person debate before. But yeah, we're just going to see this and see how this goes. So, Can You Be Born in the Wrong Body? Panel discussion at Better Discourse number 4. So this seems to have to do less with just transports. This seems to be just generally trans issues as a whole. But yeah, with that out of the way, sorry, let's begin.
And welcome to the free state of Texas. I'm for the People's Republic of New York City, so I'm just happy to be here today. This, I think, is such an important day because Myth Informed has been working tirelessly for years, and we are here to stand up for one thing today. Conversation, not cancellation.
God damn it. It's always this thing.
Myth Informed
I should go to Bitter Discourse. I want to do one of these IRL debate panels someday. I think that'd be fun.
has been working for years to bring people together of different types of people, different backgrounds, opposite political sides, to fight polarization, find common ground. Because we live in such a time right now where everything is polarized, everything in our lives is political.
Okay,
Center all thinking about hard time. Please raise your hand.
I don't care about the stand-up comedy routine. Let's listen to the debate.
The different
Here we go.
And privileged night tights, the woke ideology, SJW panel. All right, let's introduce our people.
All right, let's see.
As our moderator on our very first panel, somebody very near and dear to my heart. She is a self-described former SJW who spent years working in the woke comedy industry. She now seeks to deprogram others from the woke ideology. She's the founder of Civility Dinners. You've seen her on Tim Pool, Trigonometry, Friday Night Tights. She is also a hat fashion icon and one of my favorite humans. It is my honor and privilege to introduce Carrie Smith.
She's not even wearing a hat. They're lying about her introduction. Unbelievable. Are we going to get another like failed comedian turned conservative here? I'm not sure. We'll see.
This next guy is the host of Disaffected, where he shows us how to tell the difference between our Betty Davises and our Joan Crawfords. He is the queen bee helping us spot all the cluster bees. Put your wire hangers together for Josh Slocum.
Wait, what? Put your wire hangers? Is that what I think it is a reference to?
He is an evolutionary biologist fighting reality's last stand against gender ideology. You've seen him on Joe Rogan, PragerU, The Blaze. He's not an alphabet person, but like, he knows a lot about the alphabet people. I would say that he's a beautiful man, but I'm not a biologist. Ladies and gentlemen, Colin Wright!
Okay, God, these jokes. You will say, though, you will get some of the craziest opinions on trans and gender stuff from evolutionary biologists and psychologists often. Especially from biologists, where they often try to distill everything and have a very biologically essentialist view on things, which misses out on a lot of the important elements of social constructionism, right? And the way that interacts with our everyday human interaction. So that's my prediction from what we're going to get from this guy. We're going to get a lot of biological essentialism, and we're going to see a kind of misunderstanding of social constructionism there.
This next guy, he is a self-described SJW.
Wait, I didn't hear the introduction for the other guy. That was a very short
I would
introduction.
say that he's a beautiful man, but I'm not a biologist. Ladies and gentlemen, Colin Wright!
Oh, the other guy's the biologist guy. Okay, this guy's... Oh, this guy's the evolutionary biologist. Or is this guy... I'm not sure. One of them are.
This next guy, he is a self-described SJW. He's kind of my favorite. Okay, let's be honest. He's kind of like the only one that I like. He is the only person on this panel to have made Milo Yiannopoulos cry.
Oh, yeah,
You guys,
sure.
I'm giving you a homework assignment. When you go home, go on YouTube and type in Milo versus Jangles debate. You're going to need some popcorn. That's all I'm saying. It was like a snuff film. He can be found on his YouTube
What
channel.
the fuck are these jokes? Holy shit. Oh my god. Okay.
Channel Jangles ScienceLad, where he debates all the bros. Welcome to the stage, Justin Jangles Gibson.
What are these jokes? Go on, Jangles.
What can I possibly say about this chick? If you were to look up the word iconic in the dictionary, you would see her picture. And she'd be wearing like a little outfit. She is the host of her iconic YouTube channel where she has reached over 165 million people. She has inspired an entire movement of trans people pushing back on the woke gender ideology. She is the queen of controversy. It's a moment
Wait, is it
for her.
Blair?
You don't need me to tell you who she is. You already know. Get your ass on stage, Blair White.
Oh god. Usually when Blair is on these panels, I remember Blair being... There was like some four-person debate panel. I don't remember who was on there. I know Blair was on there, and then there was some absolutely crazy, like, religious QAnon lady. And Blair was just really quiet throughout and didn't say anything about what was going on. It's kind of sad. I don't know if we're going to get the same thing there. And yeah, once again, a very, very balanced panel we have going on here, but we'll see, we'll see.
So we decided to start today with the least controversial topic, which is, can you be born in the wrong body? A 2019 survey by the Trevor Project found that 1.8% of youth identify as transgender. That was in 2019. And that was double the percentage of youth who identified as trans just 2 years prior. Also, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, young people referred for gender treatment increased from 97 people in 2009, this was in the UK, to 2,510 people in 2017. So that was an over 4,000% increase in 10 years. Given the recent explosion of children and adults who are identifying as transgender, I want to start off with the question that brought us on the stage today. The most basic question is, do you believe people can be born in the wrong body? And if so, or if not, what does that mean to you? What do you think that means to you when people say they're born in the wrong body?
So the thing, conservatives will often like to point to the fact that you've seen an increase in the amount of people who, you know, come out as trans or receive trans treatment or whatever. And this is like proof that society's turning these people trans or whatever, when this is just not true. What seems to be the most accepted explanation for that at the moment is that just like, hey, if society becomes more accommodating and less, you know, bigoted towards certain types of people, people feel more confident in expressing and coming out as their real identity, right, and who they really are, because they are likely to face less pushback from society on account of doing so. So this has been true for trans people, as we know. This is also true for other LGBT groups. This is also true for left-handed people. You will see how the portion of people in society that have been polled to be left-handed increased dramatically when people stopped being, you know, really bad in educational systems towards people who, you know, wrote with their left hand. Does that mean that we have like a big orchestration in our educational system to turn people left-handed? No, it means that people were always like left-handed. It's just that society was hostile towards those people in the past, whereas now it's not as big of a deal anymore, and those people can just come out and be themselves and be recognized in society in such a way. That's the reason why you see an increase in recent years when it comes to stuff like this. It's not because people are being turned this, people were always this. It's just that now they feel safe enough or more safe to come out and be accepted as that.
Do you want to start, Justin?
So I would say it's a simplistic platitude to describe a pretty complex phenomenon. A good analogy would be like the Born This Way movement for gay liberation, right? Advocating for gay people, advocating for gay marriages. You know, I was born this way, and that's not quite true, but it's like kind of the simplistic platitude that we had to like adopt to like sell it to the general public. I think the better question would be like, what would make this person the happiest? I don't believe in like a soul or anything like that. So when someone says, you know, I feel like I'm in the wrong body, I feel like the best way to approach that would be like the scientific approach is, what are the things that we can do to make you happier? And it seems like the evidence points to any sort of like gender affirmative care from kids to adults seems to, at least for some people, the number is definitely not zero, and I would say it's probably the most effective treatment going forward. That it is good to affirm people's gender, makes them feel like who they are, and it's where we should be looking for as a society that values freedom, democracy, and personal liberty.
Does anyone want to respond to that?
Good opening. So far, Blair White is completely destroying the posture aspect of this debate. That is some grade A spinal rigidness right here. We love to see that. I think it's a good opening statement from from Jangles. I wonder in these debates if you should be facing the audience or if you should be facing the other debaters. I'm always unsure. He was facing the other debaters, but yeah.
I would agree. When I heard the question, I thought of a soul, and I think it's kind of a very subjective platitude, like you said. It's definitely something that was kind of spoken of in the older generations. It was kind of how they explained sometimes even cross-dressers and things, and I've never really related to the born in the wrong body narrative because the word wrong, what does wrong really mean? So subjective. So I think, again, I actually agree that the correct question is like, what do we do with people who have gender dysphoria? What is the correct road for them, the roadmap, medical care, etc. And yeah, I don't think I was born in the wrong body. I think I was like meant to be who I am, and it just happens to be a trans person. Josh?
Yeah. The question, I see this on a philosophical level.
Oh God.
I realize that probably most of us here on the stage and most of the people in the audience don't actually...
Are we gonna get like philosophy debate terms? Are we gonna get like I come at this from a Christian deontological perspective. Is that what we're gonna get? We'll see.
believe that someone can be born in the wrong body in that simplistic way. But there are a great number of people out there in this conversation who do in fact believe that and do describe it this way. And I would say that it's a question that doesn't make philosophical sense, because how are you born? You are your body, right? You can feel discomfort in your body. You can feel, I think there's a common experience between, a lot of young gay men. I remember this when I was a boy. I thought I was born in the wrong body. And a lot of what people are called gender dysphoria today, I think has a close relationship to those kinds of feelings in homosexual people when they're young. And I think it's a matter of rubbing up against stereotyped expectations. But I don't think the idea that, you were supposed to be a man, but you were born in this body makes any sense, because if we're going to credit that, then we have to get into ideas of essences and souls that, and I'm not trying to drag it into the religious sphere, but, I don't think you can, because I don't think it's a thing that can happen.
So, I mean, this is one way to philosophically approach this, right? If you have the idea that you are your body, then, I mean, technically it's not possible for you to be born in the wrong. Like, however you want to philosophically define this, obviously there's 9 million ways to kind of like wiggle out of it. The essence of the question, the spirit of the question fundamentally is about, hey, is it possible for somebody to be born in a body that is not appropriate for their optimal well-being, right? That is the obvious question that they're talking about. And because we do see people who have significant issues when it comes to gender dysphoria that in part stems from the physiological nature of their being, then it seems, fairly obvious that like, yeah, hey, if we define, living in the right body as living in a body that is most conducive to your well-being, then living in a body that is specifically invoking and directing really strong negative emotions towards you would fall under the category of living in the wrong body, right? That's the spirit of the question, I think. I mean, his answer is like, okay, well, if I define you as your body, then you can't be living in the wrong body because your body is you. I mean, sure, you can run it that way, but I mean, the spirit of the question, I think, stems more to do with well-being, but we'll see in the direction that we take this.
Yeah. So I would say the way that it's framed is sort of off because, this idea that we're born into a body, well, as a biologist, I would say that, we're not actually born into bodies. We're born, we have a body, our bodies and our minds, these things are things that develop in concert together. They create a whole human. We don't have this full mind-body distinction that's going on. And to talk about something being wrong, we kind of leave the realm of science at this point. We sort of enter in the realm of metaphysics when we talk about, whether a body can be wrong. We can talk about, a brain that might be atypical in its sort of connectivity or something, but to actually go further and say that, if your brain is so sex atypical or something, therefore it's wrong, that's just not something that science could really say. This is putting what's called
teleology. That's true. Very good point here. So I would work with this and I would say, yeah, so what it means to be wrong is subjective. What I would define as somebody like living in the wrong body is if they're living in a body that's not conducive towards their well-being. And then having some way to change that, either changing the disposition towards their body or changing the body, whatever seems to be best. And when it comes to people that suffer from gender dysphoria, it seems the only thing that really works there is to change their body in order to match their disposition and the way that they feel about their body and the way that contributes to their well-being. But we'll see what they say here. Face the person you're talking to, otherwise it feels really off. For opening statements, though, it might be better to talk towards the audience. If you're in a back and forth with somebody, it would be like weird if I'm in a back and forth with somebody here, and I'm just like, when it's my turn, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to speak to you guys now, and this is my response to what the other person said and why it's silly, and blah, 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 blah. Then I go back to them. I agree with that when it's like a back and forth, but for openings, I think it's probably better to face the audience, to be honest.
Into science. This is like a goal-orientedness in nature. Goals are something that we have within society, within cultures, within families. They're things that humans can create. But if we're talking about whether or not you can be born in the wrong body from the point of view of nature itself, that's just not a claim that really science can validate. It's a unfalsifiable, metaphysical, sort of woo-woo type of thing. So that's where I stand.
Okay, that was actually a good opening. I don't know what these guys' opinions are, but I think that's a sound philosophical, like philosophy of science way to approach the very verbiage of the question, can you be born in the wrong body? I think that was good.
So no one likes the question, basically.
Basically, I think we're in agreement on that one. So what do you guys think is behind the recent explosion in numbers of people who are identifying as transgender, whether that's children or adults?
I wonder if we're going to get a rapid onset gender dysphoria cited here. I bet we will.
I think a lot of this can be described by, I think, a changing definition of what it means to actually be trans. So I don't deny that there could be some sort of greater societal acceptance that's involved, make people feel more comfortable to come forward. Like, that's probably explains some of it. But I don't think we would see such a dramatic spike unless there was some aspect of perhaps social contagion that's taking place. And there's a...
We got it. We got the social contagion word. So the word social contagion, from my understanding, it stems from a study published by Lisa Littman titled Rapid Onset Gender Dysphoria. I'm not sure what the exact title is, but it also popularized the term rapid onset gender dysphoria. And essentially what that study set out to prove is it set out to prove that people were being transed by their social situations and their social spheres. Now, the methodology and the conclusion of that, or the methodology of that paper by no means was properly constructed in order to reach that definition in a suitable way. I'm sure Jangles might get into that later in this debate. In fact, the way I got educated by it, by first reading it myself, then reading some articles on it, but then also looking at Jangles' video on this. His video on the rapid onset gender dysphoria study by Lisa Littman is really good. But yeah, the methodology basically didn't prove this at all. They didn't actually study any trans kids. All they did was sample and talk to parents of people who claimed to have trans kids on websites which are specifically anti-trans and ask their opinion about whether or not social contagion existed, and then use that as evidence to say rapid onset gender dysphoria exists, social contagion exists, which I don't even need to explain that 99 different flaws and faults with that. And then there's a bunch of other issues with that study as well. I would recommend either Jangles' video or my video on the Lisa Littman rapid onset gender dysphoria study and the whole idea of social contagion and the fact that it has no reputable evidence backing to it at all. So yeah.
An organization, it's called eGale, it's in Canada, and they're responsible for a lot of the LGBT curriculum in schools. And when they describe on a video on their website called, it's called Trans 101, The Basics, the way that they describe what being trans is, and I think I'm quoting them verbatim, they say, if you don't behave the way society expects you to act based on what's between your legs, so based on your genitalia, that means you're transgender. And then they also go on to say you don't even need dysphoria to be considered transgender. And so
the you need to act as, like, you know, if you don't act in the way that society expects you to act based on what's in between your legs, that's a very simplistic definition of trans. I agree. I'm not sure. It's hard to validate whether or not his claim is correct, that the video actually said that. It's not impossible that it did, but it's a very oversimplified way of saying it. It's entirely possible to be gender non-conforming and not be trans, but that doesn't mean that trans people don't exist or whatever. It just means that, like, hey, that definition is very simplistic for what it means to be trans. I agree with that.
A lot of kids, I think, are hearing this, and in a very literal sense, this means that simple gender nonconformity can be sort of put into this umbrella of being transgender. So I think a lot of kids have seen this sort of new redefinition, and under this new definition, a lot of people are trans. I'm like non-binary by these definitions because I'm not, you know, a complete stereotype of masculinity. So
How much do you think trans identities are based on gender stereotypes?
I think a lot of the older ones aren't, but a lot of the kids that are coming out are based on those. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you'd be hard-pressed to find like a trans advocate, or especially someone who's like a trans specialist working in a clinic, who would say that simple gender nonconformity means that you're the opposite gender. It's going to be a lot more complex than that. Gender identity clinics don't just treat kids who are definitely transgender, but they're also treating kids who aren't behaving in a way that's stereotypical, and that's causing them distress. Like, they come to the, hey, I'm not doing the things all the other boys are doing. All the boys are making fun of me. I like girls. I like playing with girls' toys. And so they go to the clinic, not necessarily to be diagnosed as trans, but also to like talk through these feelings and why it's okay to be gender nonconforming, why it's okay to not adhere to societal stereotypes.
Okay, this is good. I think Jangles has identified one of the key talking points that a lot of the people use when it comes to situations like this, where they will be like, oh, you know, these medical institutions, they're trying to coerce or railroad people into being trans. Jangles pointing out that simply like, hey, you know, a lot of these clinics or these places that talk about gender things, they don't exist there for the sole purpose of, you know, giving somebody the trans diagnosis. They also just help people counsel through and navigate through gender dynamics in society and how that might make young people feel. So I think this is a good way to kind of demystify and like fight back against the kind of railroading notion that people have of these like places that deal with gendered issues amongst people and young people especially.
So in the modern conversation around trans issues, yeah, they're not based in stereotypes. It's way more complex than that. It's not just what your behaviors are. It's like who you are. Like where is this coming from? So I think there's enough of historical precedent to say pretty sure that this is not a new thing. That gender identity is not a new phenomenon. That it is rooted in biology. Because if it's not rooted in biology, if gender identity isn't rooted in biology, what is it? Is it supernatural? Cybernetic? What else would it be?
Can I say, I think...
Okay, so now he's illustrating as well. He's making a good point. I think that emphasizing how important the social acceptance would be beneficial there. It's not super important because the guy already said that, like, hey, I think it probably had some part to play, but that seems to be the major explanation from what I've heard. So I think him rayifying that would be very important and being like, okay, hey, social acceptance is actually really important, and this is an argument for why it's important. But what he's provided there is the mechanization for why it is not something now that's changing, by saying that, hey, this is something that seems to be intrinsic to the human experience to some extent. It's existed all throughout history. This is not something new that's now suddenly emerging. So I think that was good.
It might be helpful for us to do a little bit of a definition check. What exactly do we mean when we say trans or transgender? And what exactly do we mean specifically when we say gender identity? I'm going to make a guess here. I may get it wrong. If I'm hearing you correctly, I believe that I disagree. I don't believe in gender identity. Meaning, I don't believe that there is an essence inside people that tells them internally and is part of nature and part of the history of the universe that you are essentially a man or essentially a woman. I know that many people do believe that. I prefer to think of it as personality, inclinations, possibly sexual stereotypes, but I don't accept the construct gender identity. And I don't accept the idea that there have always been people that have a particular gender identity that is at odds with their sex. I think throughout history, there have been people who have felt various levels of discomfort in the sexual stereotype and want to take on traits of the opposite or somewhere in the middle. But gender identity, what exactly do you mean by gender identity?
So it's not just taking on the traits, right? That's not the whole thing. It's people specifically, historically, living as the other or as another gender than the one that they were assigned at birth, right? So it's not just that, oh, we've had gender non-conforming people throughout history. It's that specifically we seem to have people that have the very specific trans experience, in the sense that there seems to be some internal reality, biological, psychological, whatever it may be, that seems pretty hardwired in people. And that is put in place in a way that is divorced from sex, although it seems to correlate with sex in most people, where that not being met when it comes to social perception and social expression leads to intense discomfort. And that seems to be true. So we'll see how Jangles works with this.
Your identity is just your gender that you feel deep within your heart. Now, here's how I can think.
No, wait a minute, though. That's circular.
I know. I'm about to help you explain it. So we're two gay men on stage. So our sexuality is rooted in biology and it's probably rooted in this notion of sexual drive for the purposes of reproduction, right? So at some points in our development, probably prenatal, probably while we were in the womb, something got crossed, and we are not attracted to the opposite sex for the purposes of procreation. Contained within that is a recognition of your own sex for that same purpose of procreation, right? All right, I need to know that I'm a man in order to find a woman and then procreate with her. So the same thing for sexuality, where wires can get crossed in a certain way with gender identity. That sense of who you are does have kind of a biological basis. It does have a biological use, and human beings are complex, and I think it's good to celebrate that complexity rather than just denying the experiences of a apparently growing number of kids and adults.
I think that's a really good example. I think that's a really efficient way to explain that. I might use that in the future. I think that's a great way of explaining the kind of the internal, like, biological or the internal experience reality of gender identity in people. I think that was really good.
And I would just say really quickly, I don't accept the biology-only explanation for homosexuality either, so we may disagree on that as well.
So gender identity is very much real. It's something that's been studied for decades and decades. That's why we have gender identity disorder, which is now called gender dysphoria, and they keep changing the ballgame. This is clearly associated with some sort of mental condition that does cause you distress with your biological sex. So
okay, wait, hold on. So that guy didn't address much that Jangles had to say. I think Jangles was good there. Let's see what Bar has to say.
So gender identity is very much real. It's something that's been studied for decades and decades. That's why we have gender identity disorder, which is now called gender dysphoria, and they keep changing the ballgame. This is clearly associated with some sort of mental condition.
The reason why they changed gender identity disorder for gender dysphoria is because gender dysphoria, it makes more sense. They've analyzed it more properly. It's not the fact that you have a gender identity that doesn't match with that one you were assigned at birth. That's a disorder, because that's not a disorder, right? Because you have trans people who, have gone through their, entire transition, however far that might be for them specifically, and who now live a life free of gender dysphoria. Now, there was a gender identity mismatch there between what they identify as and what they were assigned at birth, but that's no longer a disorder, right? Because this person's now living a regular life, right? There's nothing impeding on their well-being or whatever. Whereas gender dysphoria is more something that you might experience, that trans people experience, more often than what average people do, which is the experience of being like, hey, my gender identity doesn't match up with my physiological expression, and because of that, that's something I need to rectify. And you can resolve gender dysphoria while still being trans. Being trans and being gender dysphoria aren't the same thing. Gender dysphoria is something that trans people experience, but you can be cured of gender dysphoria from transitioning, and you're still trans, but you no longer have gender dysphoria, right? And I think that's why they changed that terminology there to make that more clear.
Condition that does cause you distress with your biological sex. So I think people definitely do identify with gender in a way that isn't simply based on stereotypes. I think that you guys are kind of talking past each other in the sense of, I think traditionally transgender people have been understood as something more biological, and it's rooted in gender dysphoria, biology. I think that, as Colin stated, the definition gets so stretched that now there are a lot of people that do relate it to stereotypes. You see documentaries of parents who are allowing 4- and 5-year-olds to take on the identity of a girl if they're biologically a boy, and the reasoning they typically have is that they like the color pink, that they like Barbies, etc. That is definitely watering down the definition of what trans is and historically has been. There are studies showing that trans women's brain anatomy is sometimes similar to that of biological women. A lot of those studies are squandered by people who say they're controversial, so who knows if we'll get more of those, but there's definitely something biological. There was no reason for me to feel trans at 4 years old, but I did. Obviously, it took me many years to figure that out and identify what the correct path for me was, but it's definitely rooted in biology. I think just throwing out that there's no such thing as gender identity, I mean, you don't have to accept it, but I think that there's enough studies to show that it is real.
Okay, so we're Blair White, I think, leaning and accepting more of what Jangles said. I think that was a pretty good explanation there. Yeah.
So I can take sort of a middle ground, possibly. Like, I do think that some people have what they might experience as a very deeply seated internal sense of being a man or a woman. I don't think everyone has one of those things. I think that's some things that some people feel very deeply and some people don't. But I think that there is differences in definition that we have. So I think that can be a real thing that people can experience. But then, as I mentioned, like these organizations like EGALE, they're literally defining gender identity being trans based on if you're not acting the way society is expecting you to act based on what's between your legs, then you're trans. And that's really just rooted in stereotypes. And I know maybe that's not a definition you're using, and that's fine. But to me, it's just like, well, we need to like take the people, the organizations that are making these claims. If I disagree with those and if you disagree with those, we need to make sure that they hear that we disagree with those definitions, because a lot of kids are hearing that, and in their brains is reinterpreting these as strict gender stereotypes. So I'm just a messenger. I'm just saying what they're saying. Like, this isn't necessarily my position on what it is. I just feel that.
Yeah. So Django should know it should being like, yeah, saying that like being trans and gender non-conforming behavior is the same thing is silly. Like that's all Django's need to say. There's nothing more in this specifically. Once again, it's hard to quantify how widespread of a thing this is, as the other person is saying here. I mean, they cited one example, but regardless, this is not something that needs to be fought on. They can just be, yeah, that's silly. We should have more fact-based, more evidence-based, more realistic, more comprehensive, better understanding and better definitions of what being trans means, and that's not a good definition.
That this is probably a big reason why we have a lot of kids that are claiming to be trans. And then unfortunately we have a sort of a medical establishment that I don't think has really caught up to this definitional change. And so we're sort of beginning to medicalize, or at least beginning to push people down that process of medicalization who are simply just gender nonconforming.
In the definition of what trans is, there's also like...
So here he makes kind of an empirical claim here that he can be pushed on, because he says there are people being pushed down the medical path that aren't, and it would be interesting to hear if it's just like an assumption he has, or if he has like some specific piece of information that supports this. And then, given what that piece of information is, you could probably work with that.
Cultural meaning too, the way people have viewed transgender people has changed every decade. Actually, every few years now at this point, it's rapidly changing because the conversation's exploded. So initially, people saw it as sort of cross-dressers, and then there was more medical science available. So then it's biological men who become trans women, et cetera, vice versa. And then it became any gender identity that isn't your own, so then it's suddenly not just one or two, suddenly it's many. So I think when you expand the definition, it's only natural more people will fit under. Like you said, you technically probably fit under it as well. And then there's also the push to rid gender dysphoria and actual diagnosis from the equation. A lot of activists push for that you don't have to have dysphoria to be trans. So then all that's really left from that is stereotypes. So the people I think that believe dysphoria isn't a factor, if someone could tell me what else the factor would be, other than just a choice for whatever reasons, but I think all that's really left is stereotypes.
I think for people who, so you, Justin, you believe in gender identity, that this is a thing.
Of course.
And I think some people wonder if you can choose, if gender identity, your identity is something you feel in your heart. If you can choose that when it comes to your gender, why can't you choose that when it comes to your race? And I know sometimes people laugh at this question like it's silly, but Rachel Dolezal, there have been several Rachel Dolezals since she hit the news. And so what makes race and the way if a person is raised in a different race and they feel like they're part of that culture, what makes that different than gender?
So the main difference is we don't see people experiencing the same degree of attachment or the same degree of dysphoria towards their racial makeup and their racial identification society, as opposed to the gendered one. It seems like the gender one is way more significant there and has way more backing to it existing as like a trend throughout the entirety of society, as opposed to transracialism. That's the answer I would give for this specific one.
Because we can have that biological basis for gender that we don't really have for race. It's not important for you as a human being who needs to go out and procreate and think like caveman times for you to have a race. You can have a sense of identity, you can have a sense of a tribe, and that could be race, but it's not as intrinsic as something like gender or sexuality. But hey, if there's a lot of research that came out, if I had meta-analysis after meta-analysis showing that transracial people have happier lives if they transition to be another race, I want people to be happy. And if the research told me that, I want to be consistent in what I believe, and I want happier people.
That's a good answer.
So I guess I'll wait for the research on transracialism before I bite the bullet on that question.
I think that is the main difference, is that there's a very long historical precedent and scientific precedent for gender dysphoria. I keep going back to that because, again, trans is just an identity.
Blair White copied my talking points before this debate. She watched all my videos in preparation for this.
But you don't have that same, maybe it's just not a topic heavily researched, but, transsexual people are a group of people that have been around for a very, very long time. So you have a community that's been around forever, and then you have Rachel Dolezal and like 3 other people. It's kind of like, I don't know.
Well, I would say, and I think from your point of view, Justin, I think I hear you saying that there is a body of scientific work that has been validated that shows this. I have read a lot of this work. I haven't read all of it. You probably have a bibliography to hand much better than I do. But from what I have read, I remember this from the 1990s when everybody was looking for the gay gene, when Simon LeVay was doing his big research, and then that didn't pan out. I've read many of these studies, and I'm not the final arbiter on them, but if you were to ask me...
She just pulls out her phone and starts texting. Giga Chat Blair White does not care what the other panelists have to say.
In my opinion, I would say, no, I'm sorry, I don't believe that there is all this settled science. I think a lot of it's controversial. I think a lot of it, to me, appears to be methodologically flawed, sometimes circular, and not well controlled.
Oh,
so,
I would, the data mail bells are ringing off. I so wanted to get into that. That'd be really interesting. And I know Jangles would do really well in that if that was a topic of discussion.
There may be some in there, but I don't believe, and you may believe this, and other people may believe this, but no, I don't believe that this is settled science. I don't believe that science has shown that there is a thing called gender identity.
So nothing is ever settled science, so you can never deductively prove something, especially in social sciences. It is extraordinarily difficult. All we do have is we have consensus based on the best available information. And right now, we have a pretty good, broad, comprehensive base of evidence for this topic specifically, for the fact that, hey, gender identity seems to be something that exists, it seems to be something that's expressed in society, and it seems to have a link to things that we can identify, such as gender dysphoria, and it seems to have a link then to those treatment options and the way that that impacts that thing. Like, we do have a pretty good base of literature that supports this at the moment, and we have very little good literature, if any at all, that says that, oh, gender identity isn't something that's real. So just because it's not settled, like, deductively or whatever, which very few things, basically nothing, actually, never mind, nothing within the social sciences ever are or ever will be, then that's not a good enough of a reason to be, like, ultimately skeptical. You have to look at the body of evidence that exists, and I guess if this guy says that there's significant methodological flaws or whatever, then that would be interesting to hear, but from my understanding, that doesn't exist.
So I need to ask you, you kind of doubted the notion that it was biological. So I'll kind of ask you the same question that I ask a lot of people. If it isn't biological, what is it? What's the other option?
I think the other options, and there are many, it's not just one, but we know from looking around, we know from...
Well, this is appeal to consensus. There's nothing fallacious with appealing to academic consensus if you're discussing a topic of academic or scientific reality, right? That's fine. If you're discussing whether or not, gender dysphoria exists, and you're like, hey, overwhelmingly the literature points towards the existence of it, that's not like a fallacious appeal at all. I don't think there's anything wrong. I doubt it would be accepted if it went any other way. I'm not sure what to comment on that. I mean, science functions in the scientific capacity. There's plenty of controversial things that go against, like, on its face intuitively, like a highly progressive agenda that is still published nevertheless. But unless you have any reason to demonstrate that the research is faulty or flawed or incorrect, then I don't think there's a good argument to be made there. But yeah. But it absolutely should carry an intellectual weight. If you're arguing the existence of a scientific or of an academic thing, and you appeal to consensus and the body of evidence on that, then that is a fine appeal to make. Thank you for the raid, by the way. But yeah.
News reports we know from some recent surveys and studies, especially with young people. And by the way, I'm not telling anybody how they have to live. It doesn't make any difference to me if somebody feels themselves more male or female. I am not in a dictatorial position. I'm just talking about what the truth of the matter is. There is a hugely high correlation in young people between having what we today call gender dysphoria issues and psychiatric comorbidities, and a very high correlation with neglectful or traumatic or abusive household upbringings. There's one study from the Society for Evidence-Based Gender call gender dysphoria in young people between having what we today call gender dysphoria issues and psychiatric comorbidities, and a very high correlation with neglectful or traumatic or abusive household upbringings. There's one study from the Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine that found an 88% correlation between children who were diagnosed today with gender dysphoria and having multiple other psychiatric comorbidities that appeared to be based in attachment and trauma problems. It's not the whole answer. There's also autism. There's also social contagion. There are also, I think, many young kids who will turn out to be gay.
So, okay.
I look at many of the
well,
kids
we're
today.
getting a lot of things here. I don't know specifically about that study. Jangles has probably heard of it, so I'll be excited to hear his answer. on this specifically, but it seems like it makes sense that somebody who might be trans would also experience a number of social hardships on account of being trans. That doesn't seem entirely like you need to kind of establish the causal link there. Is it one cause the other, or is it the gender dysphoria cause those traumatic experiences? Like, that's something that's very important there to establish, because I mean, we do already know that people who are trans, they experience more hardships in society when it comes to things like discrimination and like violence and stuff like that, as a whole. So that would necessarily surprise me. So I'd be interested to see if that causal link is fleshed out there. Then when it comes to things like autism, it also wouldn't be entirely surprising that maybe autistic people have like a higher likelihood than the like an average population distribution to have a mismatch there. But that doesn't mean that mismatch isn't there or isn't real. It just means that certain portions of the population are overrepresented in that mismatch. But that doesn't mean it's like socially or societally caused or whatever. So yeah, we'll see.
Who say, I feel I have this gender identity, and I see myself in 1980 and 1981. I think it was a common experience for a lot of kids who grew up to be gay. So I think there are many different ones, not just one.
So I think there could be
Oh no, Jangles out of mic. I want to hear Jangles respond to that.
That's sort of rooted in both social dynamics and in biology as well. I mean, I think what a lot of people mean when they talk about their gender identity, what they're really meaning is, there's a combination of innate biological traits that you have that will cause you to be more masculine or feminine in your personality and your preferences and your behaviors. There's average differences between males and females on this. So by just your social interactions on the playground when you're a kid, you sort of realize if you're a little boy that you're more masculine in this sense, and you tend to just fit in with your other.
Blair's postures. On point.
Your friends who tend to be who are males, who are boys.
Red
do
guys
know that there
well.
is a correlation between homosexuality and being more gender nonconforming. So it's completely, I think, straightforward to think that if you're a really gender nonconforming child, if you're a really effeminate boy, you're going to possibly have some level of dysphoria because your behaviors, your tendencies, a combination of being innate and identifying where your behavioral traits sort of exist among your friends, among all the kids in your school. And you can kind of see where this could be sort of reified back into your mind as saying, oh, I can identify with these masculine traits of my other male friends, or I actually identify with the traits that I commonly see in girls. And I think a lot of that is just kids sort of recognizing their own personality based on the cohort of the kids they see around them and where they sort of seem to fit in.
Well, this is the problem, the fact that we spent so much...
No, Jangles, you gotta interrupt! Look, he was ready to go. Look at him.
The cohort of the kids they see around them and where they sort of seem to fit in.
Well, this is the problem, the fact that we spend so much time...
Yeah, okay, this is really difficult. I understand, especially in person, and it's really difficult because here's the issue with this: you need to strike a perfect balance on these on stage panels, especially on any panel. Actually, is that you need to strike the balance between being assertive enough where you won't let somebody say something that you can demonstrate or you can argue against that being true, and it not be contested, but also not being hyper confrontative and hyper like, wait, hold on, I need to do that, because then you also come off looking really poorly. It's a difficult balance to strike here, because the longer it goes, since a person said something that you want to address, the weaker and the softer it's going to hit when you actually go back and address that. So the longer time goes, the less that response is going to hit and the less value it's going to have in the minds of the audience and for the flow of the debate as a whole. But also if you interrupt too much, you're going to come off as like overly combative or overly confrontative, and then people are going to write you off because of that as well. So it's a difficult situation.
Trying to define what exactly transgender is. And we're all adults on this stage who have probably read various literatures about this and really thought about this topic. I don't think we would have been chosen for this panel if we weren't all at least, regularly reading about this stuff. So that's the kind of the problem when you bring it down to...
You'd be surprised as to who they pick on these random debate panels.
A child's level is like, yes, gender dysphoria is something you see in an extremely small percentage of the population. Historically, it was young boys, now it's flipped to young girls. We can talk about why that is. And you're right that there are, in a lot of these cases of kids now identifying, it's often linked, I think 45%, there's been a few studies that show it's linked to a traumatic event, which to me...
Okay, this is fine. If Blair White brings it up again, then it gives another opportunity for Jangles to bring it up, and it doesn't lose as much of its oomph, I
think that is the same thing. And I think the fact that we get so confused about what trans is, doctors are people, therapists are people, teachers are people, these kids' parents are people. So while it may be true that a very small fraction of these kids will grow up and, live as a trans person, transition, maybe be all the better for it, I think that it is also true, and you can't deny that there are some people, and kids specifically, that are slipping into the cracks that would end up just being effeminate gay men, etc. A lot of the narratives of my childhood of liking certain things, behaving a certain way, are mirrored by gay men that I know. And the only difference is they kind of grew out of it, and mine persisted so intensely that I had to act on it, and it was a good thing to do. But
so to be clear, it is entirely possible that people might be a bit overzealous on prescribing the trans label instead of just gender non-conforming. Now, once again, I don't think it's anywhere near the way conservatives are painting it up to be, and also there are significant and there are like good what's it called checks and balances, especially on the medical side of things, that minimize the risk for this happening, of people, like Blair said, slip through the cracks, but it probably happens to some extent. I would be silly to say that this never happens. But when this topic is brought up, you need to kind of recenter and be like, okay, as a pro-trans as a pro-trans rights advocate, this is not something I'm in favor of. I'm not in favor of us kind of conflating transness and gender nonconformedness, and we should do our very best to be able to make sure that that's distinct and to not get overzealous when it comes to the distinctions between these two different things. I 100% agree with that. The solution to those problems existing in marginal cases is not, however, to roll back all trans rights or to stop people from transitioning or to be hyper skeptical or whatever. That's not the solution. It's just a problem that's probably going to exist to some extent. We should do our very best to combat it, but it doesn't really impact the broader prescription when it comes to the handling of trans people in society, right?
Yeah, there's kids falling through the cracks because we can't even cement the cracks for ourselves yet.
Well, since you brought it up, maybe it's a good question.
Jangles again with the mic off and he hasn't dropped it. God damn it, Jangles! Come on, you gotta get in here, Jangles. You gotta get in.
Do you think rapid onset gender dysphoria is that?
Oh, here we go. Now we got the ROGD. Now we got the rapid onset. So I think that there's two more specific study things that Jangles wants to talk about now. We're gonna get the rapid onset thing, and then we're gonna get the thing from before.
What is that? How is it different than what we used to know about gender dysphoria?
Yeah, so historically it's been studied that, it's, I think, 2 to 1 showing up in young males throughout history. And now it's flipped to 2 to 1 females to males. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we can speculate that would be. I think social contagion is one aspect of it. It's not the entire story, but one part of it, because I think what you see is it popping up in a lot of friend groups, which doesn't seem so organic to me.
So this is the Lisa Littman thing that she's talking about, right? She's talking about the friend groups and stuff like that. God, Jangles can be right.
I certainly didn't have people in my life as a kid that were also experiencing these things. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you're seeing cases of parents sometimes. There's a popular YouTube vlog channel called the Coney Jolies, and the dad came out as trans, and then 6 months later, the 7-year-old kid comes out as trans and is now talking about blockers. And so I think that it can be.
So that can make sense, right? Especially if you lean towards a more like biological explanation for something, some internal reality when it comes to like gender identification. That if a father has it, then it's probably more likely than a control group that the offspring of that father of that parent is going to have it as well, right? So this isn't like this is a weird argument. It makes sense given the analysis that like Jangles had like laid out before.
Taken on partly due to social contagion and just a lot of other things, like it's showing up in populations of young girls that have eating disorders and body issues and cutting and that sort of stuff. And I think that there's some overlap there, but I don't think
is there evidence at all for it being hereditary? I don't think there's specifically hereditary studies because the sample sizes are incredibly small, and doing hereditary studies is very difficult unless you have a pretty broad sample size. But theoretically, it doesn't like it would make sense, right? Assuming that, and there is evidence pointed towards that there's probably some form of internal kind of biological thing that's driving that part of this.
That any of that erases that there are actual trans people who feel that way from young, study it until they're older, make a choice as an adult and for themselves, and I think that that is still valid, and I think that there's just an explosion of consciousness about this issue right now.
Jangles needs to hop in now.
Literally ever, and so
Go on,
everyone's
Jangles.
kind of just right and wrong at the same time about everything.
So rapid onset gender dysphoria doesn't seem to be a meaningfully
There we go.
consistent explanation for any of the things that we're seeing, especially the social contagion. So Lisa Littman, who's the author who originally came up with rapid onset gender dysphoria, came out with a follow-up study a few years ago with data that was collected around the same time. And in doing so, and I have to say, I don't think that study is worthless, but I do think it was heavily biased towards to get a certain narrative that she wanted to push. And even with that heavy bias, and even studying only detransitioners, only the people who are going to be most likely to have quote-unquote fallen victim to rapid onset gender dysphoria, she found that the vast majority of the detransitioners that she talked to did not have another trans person in their friend group. So if you say social contagion as in like, oh, I hang out with a lot of trans people and that's what kind of made me want to be trans, and we've all made fun of cis people, this wasn't borne out in her own data. As far as like social influence, I think it would be dishonest to say that there's no social influence, but social influence doesn't have to be a bad thing. If we were born 70 years ago, I don't know if we would have come out as gay men. Or we would have the same biology coming into it. Of course, genes manifest themselves in an environment, so maybe we would have to suppress it a little bit more. But we might not.
So once again, social contagion and social influence are two different things, right? You can be socially influenced by an environment to come out, and that social influence is that the environment is more amicable towards you and won't treat you as poorly as it may have done historically. That's a social influence. Social contagion is something different. Contagion means kind of somebody getting something that they didn't have beforehand, right? That's the difference between social influence and social contagion, right? If you are trans, but you lived like 40, 50 years ago, or like Jangles says, if you're gay, but you lived like 60 years ago, whatever, there are social influences that stop you from coming out, being more hostility. Today, there is more social influences pushing you in favor of it because like, hey, we're now friendlier than we were before to gay people. That's a social influence. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing malicious about that. Social contagion specifically would be like, hey, you're being infected with the gay. Your society is sprinkling the gay on you and making you gay, which is a very different thing. So I think it's a good thing for him to clarify the differences there.
Come out as gay. We might not have had that identity. It's good that we have gay role models. It's good that we have an ideology that we're pushing on our children, that it's fine to be gender nonconforming, and it's fine to turn out as gay or bi.
Okay. That's not going to fly very well with the crowd. I don't think they're at a state where they're ready to joke about the gender ideology like that. But I appreciate the fun.
An environment, so maybe we would have suppressed it a little bit more. But we might not have come out as gay. We might not have had that identity. It's good that we have gay role models. It's good that we have an ideology that we're pushing on our children, that it's fine to be gender nonconforming, and it's fine to turn out as gay or bi or pan. It's all that is fine. So social contagion doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing.
I think that social
Okay, we didn't address the trauma thing, so maybe we will later. We'll see.
influence and social contagion, as you said, isn't necessarily an inherently negative thing. I agree. But the difference when we're talking about trans versus, you mentioned like gay, bi, pan, all that, is that trans is associated now with young teenagers and people who are not properly developed mentally, making medical decisions for their bodies that are going to last a lifetime. So I think
it depends on what we're talking about, right? If we're just talking about social transition, which can be gone back, and if we're talking about puberty blockers, which are kind of like SSRIs in that, you know, hey, they do have some really, really distinctly positive effects, you know, for a lot of people, and there are also some negative side effects that come there, although it should absolutely be the choice of, you know, like a kid or a parents to decide to go on them. But the vast majority of the effects are perfectly reversible and perfectly safe. Absolutely, like without a doubt, they're reversible and safe for the vast most part. And they should absolutely be available as an option, and that is once again mostly reversible. So the likelihood of like a lot of the more permanent parts of this, such as like HRT or surgery options, it's usually very unlikely that those are afforded to people who are in their teenage years or adolescents or even younger than that, right?
I think that is the main difference. I understand why so many people get frustrated when you conflate gay and trans, because they are so different. If you have a 12-year-old going on puberty blockers that's never going to be able to bear children, it's like, yeah, you can say the
I don't think there's been a link established between puberty blockers and infertility. I don't think that's true.
influence wasn't necessarily bad, but that person still can't have kids because they were influenced as a kid.
And I would say, Justin, I think you're right. It's much less likely that we would have been able to come out as
Has there
gay
been
men.
a link? Is there a link there? Hold on. Puberty blockers, infertility. I don't think. Okay. Puberty blockers are falsely claimed to cause infertility and to be irreversible despite no substantiated evidence. From the Lancet. Okay. So. Okay, so that doesn't seem to be no, there doesn't seem to be any evidence of the of infertility as being a as being a side effect of puberty blockers. It doesn't seem to be true at all.
Years ago, before social mores changed, obviously.
Before social justice, right?
I'm sorry?
Before social justice, right? Woo!
Well, it depends on your view of social. It's much less likely that we would have been able to come out as gay men 70 years ago, before social mores changed, obviously.
Before social justice, right?
I'm sorry?
Before social justice, right? Woo!
Well, it depends on your view of social justice. You know, I'm sure we could all find some brand of social justice we could get behind. I'm not behind the current one, but that doesn't mean I don't think there are some other ones that are good. But I don't see this as an unalloyed good at all. I think this is much more than having role models. I think that this is pressure that has become cult-like. And I think there's a very big difference between creating a world in which it is socially acceptable to be an effeminate boy or a tomboy or a butch girl. And I remember that world being created during my young years in the late 70s, in the early 80s. I remember Free to Be You and Me. I remember when Legos were advertised in a unisex way. I remember when I came out very young in the late 80s. I remember that our goal, that I thought was our goal as gay people, was to bring us to this world where we said, you can be a sissy boy or a real tough girl. It doesn't mean you're not a real man. And what I see now, I don't see this as, oh, you can be this. If we were just talking about allowing children to dress the way they wanted and to have the mannerisms the way they wanted, that's fine with me. That's what I fought for. But we're saying now, oh, you're a boy who likes Madonna. You're a boy who likes to put on pink lipstick. You're not actually a boy. Maybe you're not a boy, and maybe you need to have your genitals worked on. I'm sorry, that's not a good.
So once again, the genitals thing is not something that for kids that is applicable when it comes to surgery and stuff like that. That's way farther down the line. Trying to kind of reel this all in and saying that everything happens as you as a kid is pretty like a scaremongery tactic. But I mean, yeah, we should move towards like a society with way less gender roles and way more gender fluidity. And to some extent, I do see how certain elements of the trans movement can get overzealous in that department, and that's something that's negative and should be fought against. But just because that exists to some extent doesn't mean that we throw out the entirety of the trans movement. It just then means that we have to be more scrutinous towards stuff like this.
That's your understanding of gender affirmative healthcare? Hold on. I think if that's your understanding of what gender affirmative healthcare looks like, you haven't looked at it at all. Do you think it's, yeah, I have too. Do you think it's that simplistic? So around the time that you came out, you said early 1980s, there's a book being published called...
Okay, okay, if you're gonna do like a thing like that, like I don't think you have any understanding. Have you even looked at this at all? You need to have like a direct, like a boom, like a quick little snip that you can add after that to be like, you're wrong about this. It seems like he's gonna go on a longer thing here.
The Sissy Boy Syndrome. That's an actual study. That's its actual title. And it's actually one of the studies that James Cantor came out with for his like desistance statistics. So yeah, it is good. No gender activist, no gender ideologue today would say, no, boys can't play with girly things and vice versa. No one would say that. So the fact that you think it's that easy, yeah, no, I mean, come on. Let me define my position. I think I can do it a little bit better than you. So gender affirmative healthcare does mean exploring.
Okay, there's a bit of passive aggressiveness. I think that it's sort of, because so far they've been having a kind of civil conversation. The guy says something, the other guy says something that gets applause, and now we see a bit of passive aggressiveness here, which is, yeah, I don't think this comes off very good. I think you need to like still try to remain calmer a bit longer. If it gets more heated, then stuff like this is fine, but I think we kind of went from like nothing and audience applause to kind of like passive aggressive pretty quickly.
All these gender nonconforming behaviors. Gender identity is not about your simple behaviors and preferences. It is deeper than that, and it is rooted in biology. And everything is rooted in biology because otherwise it would be cybernetic or supernatural. Those are the only places it can come from. They're going to manifest themselves in different environments, and I want to create an environment where kids are the most likely to be happy. I don't necessarily want a cis kid. I want a happy kid. And gender affirmative care says, hey, if you end up being cis, that's what makes you happy? Fantastic. You're trans? That's also fantastic. You're somewhere in the middle, you're non-binary, you're just fine being a gender nonconforming kid? Awesome. I want that happy kid, and I think the research supports me.
So I think there is like a defensible position that you can have that's, you can reasonably defend about certain safeguardings regarding kids being put on hormones or whatever. But there's also sort of these Bailey arguments, ones that we see out in the public a lot more, and the ones we also see in the classroom, I think, too. I think a lot of the rapid onset gender dysphoria stuff we're seeing, which a lot of people think is part of that 4,000% spike we see in people claiming to be gender dysphoric. I think a lot of this, and I'll bring it back to something I said earlier, has to do with really the changing definitions that we have and that are commonly found in children's classrooms. Maybe not all children's classrooms. Maybe this isn't something you believe, but it's something that kids are receiving. They're receiving these lessons, that have something called the genderbread person on them. And when you look on the actual chart, it's this gingerbread-looking person, and it has, it's got like your biological sex. What is that? And then when it talks about your gender identity, it has manness and womanness on a slide.
If you're in a 1v3 like this, going in hard is good, IMO. Not if you have a good reason to come in hot, then it's fine. Like if you because the issue is that it was kind of calm. The other guy said something that got applause, and then we directly went to kind of like a bit more of the passive aggressive thing, which I don't think was, yeah.
Sliding scale, and then the traits they have, and presumably this would include boyness and girlness for kids in a class, and the traits that they have on what determines whether you're more of a man or more of a woman or a girl or a boy are things like body hair and voice pitch, body shape.
And more thing, I think what was needed more in Jangles' reply is being like, hey, like there are, like, here's a list of like the safeguards. It's not just like, oh, hey, you're gender non-conforming, let us go through the entire process. I think we need more distinguishment about, okay, what the different steps of the process looks like, right? Social transition, maybe puberty blockers, like stuff like this, HRT, like going through the steps. So it's not just like you're getting transed now, all the time. Hormones, surgery, all of it at once, right away. Bing, bang, boom, done, Trying to like de-escalate and be like, hey, this is like a long and elongated thing, talking about barriers that exist, talking about like, the types of requirements that might exist for these certain treatments. Stuff like this to basically make this fear of like people being like rushed to the transing rooms or whatever at the clinics. I think that was what was needed more there than just saying like, oh well, just because you're gender non-conforming doesn't mean like you're trans. Obviously, this is not what's happening, but without really like explaining that. Yeah.
Things like this that are, secondary sex characteristics, the characteristics we get when we go through puberty, but these aren't necessarily what define being a boy or a girl or a male or a female. So this is what kids are receiving, okay? They're receiving lessons like this, and those are rooted in not just sort of stereotypes of masculinity and femininity, but also anatomical features that they have. So you can get, the takeaway message from a lot of these that a little girl might see going through puberty is, I don't have large breasts, does that make me less of a female, less of a woman? These are the kind of messages that I think a lot of kids are getting in their classrooms. I have parents send these to me all the time saying, this is what my kid brought home. We have EGAL that's defining being trans as whether or not you behave according to what society expects based on what's between your legs. I mean, the take-home message for a kid is clearly just going to be...
So this guy seems to be like a one trick with that specific issue. And I think Jangles just needs to be like, I think at this point, Jangles needs to be like, yeah, maybe there are aspects that are overzealous with the labeling of trans instead of gender non-conforming, sure, and that's negative, and we should do our very best to minimize that. But that doesn't broadly oppose like pro-trans rights social prescriptions towards the handling and the treatment of these people, right? We need that so they can move on from this, right? That's what we need. But I also understand that there's a bit of like a fright to agree and give and cede any ground when you're on a panel like this with 3 other people. And that might be like a bit of like a thing that's going on right now that might be making Jangles a bit reluctant in saying that specifically. But I think that's what we need, because I think we need to move on from this, because you're gonna get stuck here when there's so many really good points that I know Jangles knows really well, that he can like hammer them down on instead.
Stereotypically masculine, therefore I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. These are the ways that kids are thinking about these things. I think there are more defensible ways to talk about them, but I think this is broadly the message that a lot of kids are getting, which I think is responsible for this, the huge spike in gender dysphoria, or purported gender dysphoria, that we're seeing.
This is why, as much as I'm really not trying to downplay you guys' experience of coming out and being gay and from the generations that you guys are, but the trans thing is just so different. And I feel like there's such a different ethical conversation to be had about 12-year-olds getting surgery, about 12-year-olds being on blockers and having health complications for the rest of their life. And if they're lucky, no complications, but they're still
Jangles needs to address the puberty blockers. This is the second time this is brought up.
medicalized for the rest of their life. When you're trans,
and also the 12-year-olds getting surgery as well is also something that needs to be brought
and you have to take hormones forever. You do not stop. I don't know. We don't really know what happens when you start that at 12 or 13. You can list all the possible, problems with Lupron and different medications, but the plastic surgery clinic that I used for my entire transition is located in Plano, Texas, which is a suburb here in Dallas. And I was there recently supporting my friend who was getting surgery, and they told me that due to the new laws in Texas,
all the conservative people on this panel were like, "See, social contagion is real. Blair has a trans friend."
Kids from getting surgeries, they were having to turn a bunch of patients down. Some of them as young as 12 years old who are getting double mastectomies. That's breast removal. That is permanent. That is not reversible through any other means other than implants, which are not breasts. So I think when you have kids that are altering their bodies forever, the conversation is just so different, and you have to take ethics into consideration.
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, of course. So the reason I'm comparing gay and trans is because, from a social movement perspective, there are some similarities, but of course, your sexuality is going to be different than your gender identity, and that could possibly, gender identity might possibly lead to some sort of medicalization. You know what y'all's problem is on that whole topic? You haven't gone woke enough, all right? You got to talk to the super woke gender activists who say you can look any way, act any way, and your gender identity is just what you feel. You haven't gone woke enough. That's your problem. No, but I do think that it is a good conversation to talk about and the nuances of it.
Maybe I'm not tapped in, but these jokes aren't hitting really well for me.
All of us want better research. All of us want more scientifically informed answer. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But we're not going to get there if we have half the conversation being, is gender identity real? No, we have to move past that. It is real. It's absolutely real. So now let's talk about what we do with that information. We can't have this information about hey, maybe there's this organization who's putting out an ultra simplistic, confusing, and probably scientifically incorrect version of a video to kids explaining gender identity. We can talk about that, but we also need to talk about how Florida is saying that no, you shouldn't socially transition your kid at all, despite the fact that is what the research says is the best. And that's not even medicalization. It's not going to hurt to let a kid socially transition, but they're blocking that from the conversation. I want the best evidence. I want the best way forward. I want the most scientifically informed position that is going to help the most kids and adults be happy, and we have to come somewhere in the middle here.
So I just recently learned that Sweden and Finland have both taken steps to ban gender reassignment surgery for anyone until they're 18 years old. And also the Karolinska Hospital recently ended the practice of prescribing puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones to gender dysphoric patients who are under the age of 18. Are we behind the curve? Is that something that you could agree with other people on this panel about when it comes to children, or are you still waiting for more evidence?
The vast preponderance of the evidence that I've seen on puberty blockers says that they are, when prescribed correctly, of course if they're prescribed incorrectly, they're going to have harmful effects, but when prescribed correctly, they do have favorable impacts on gender dysphoria, and they do potentially have negative side effects, but I think...
With children, though?
Children. Yeah, that's obviously what you're talking about.
How do you prescribe Lupron correctly for children for puberty? What is the way to correctly prescribe a chemical that artificially blocks the puberty of a child? How do you prescribe that correctly?
By talking to the psychiatrist, talking to the endocrinologist, talking to their gender-affirming team, and seeing if this is the best option forward for this individual child. That's how you do it. You do it because the evidence says that it helps the kid.
So there are times when it is appropriate, medically correct, and why.
So I think this is an issue that I had a lot, and I think this is the main kind of critique or crux that I might have for Jangles in this debate, and I did this as well before, where being a progressive or left-leaning person, for the most part, or pretty much everything that I'm aware of, the evidence and the research seems to be on our position seems to accommodate the evidence in the literature in a positive way, right? We can work within those. However, when you're having a debate with somebody that's confrontational to you, just being appealing to, well, this is what has the best outcomes, this is what shows up best, this is what the studies say works. While you're correct and that's true, that's not the best argument to make in the situation. I think in these situations, you need to do two things. You need to, number one, explain that hey, the evidence sides of me, and then give some of the mechanization. Explain why it has those positive effects, and really like mechanize why this thing leads to those positive effects. So when it comes to puberty blockers, for example, you can be like, okay, so the reason why puberty blockers has positive effect is because puberty is specifically one of the key periods in the trans person's life where they experience the most negatives from, their gender dysphoria, because their body is changing in ways that are very, 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 that they're very opposed to. They go incredibly uncomfortable in their body. And just seeing all these changes brings them a great amount of mental anguish. And what puberty blockers can do is that puberty blockers can prevent this from happening. Not only improving it for them, like in the, while they're going through, or they would have gone through puberty, where they don't have to experience all those negatives, but also making things like, for example, HRT more effective. Because if you're trans and if you've gone through a regular puberty, then HRT is still going to be effective, but it's going to be less effective than if you had never gone through your puberty and then gone directly to HRT. So that's another way in which puberty blockers assist trans people and help their well-being. Like, you need explanations like this, right? You can't just be like, oh, well, it's positive, and just kind of leave it there. You need to say it's positive because here is the mechanization for how we get from puberty blockers to those positive outcomes. That needs to be explained, because if you don't explain that, then it will come off as you're just saying, oh, hey, this is a positive thing, without like explaining why that is. And if you intuitively don't believe it, then you might just like write off the research. Whereas if you're like, hey, this is what the research says and this is how that works, then it's going to be a lot more agreeable. It's going to be a lot more understandable. So yeah, I think Jangles needs to not only do the outcome oriented statements that he's making right now, but he also needs to do the mechanization bit there. I think that's very important.
Is to stop a otherwise healthy and normal child from developing gonads, from developing secondary sex character.
So otherwise healthy, normal, well, if we're talking about somebody that has gender dysphoria, right, they wouldn't be healthy because they're suffering from like they're suffering from gender dysphoria, right?
Characteristics, and possibly from developing brain tissue. You think that there's a time that this is
brain tissue? I don't think a lot of the side effects that he mentioned here and the infertility that Blair mentioned don't seem to be actual side effects. I hope Jangles addresses that.
This is correctly done.
Absolutely, because I listen to what the research says.
That's surprising.
I'd also like to say that I've known a lot of trans women in my life. So the conversation that you like,
yeah,
no offense,
you don't have that. Jangles is saying you're wrong. Look at the research, and he's correct, but he needs to give the mechanization.
you guys can have from outside the community, and I can have it having lived in it. And there are a lot of people that I know that transitioned from blockers and hormones at a very young age and had major complications with their surgeries, because if you do not, this is graphic, but if you do not develop a sizable penis, you cannot turn it into a vagina. So if you are blocking puberty, you will not develop a penis that is substantial enough, this sounds crazy, to turn into a vagina surgically.
So this is there is some evidence suggesting that, and for some people this is an issue. That's true. I think I've heard mixed things on this, but I think that this is true. But then this also needs to be contrasted with all the other issues that come with not taking puberty blockers, right? This is a key thing that I talk a lot about when I do these reviews, is that if you're going to make an argument about whether something is positive or negative, it is not sufficient to just point at the negatives and just leave it there. You need to point at the positives, right? So sure, you might have you might have certain people might have a harder time with the bottom surgery part if they are MTF and they take puberty blockers, but they also have it easier in all these different ways. Like their hormones are going to be way more effective. The likelihood for them to need certain types of like surgery, like for example facial feminization surgery, I believe, is going to be reduced as well. So it's not just like, okay, they have this negative effect there, when it comes to bottom surgery for some people, but it's also like, hey, they also prevent the need for other types of surgical interventions and increase the efficacy of other treatments like HRT as well, and have those give better outcomes as well. So you need to have like the entire scale of what puberty blockers do. It's not enough to just be like, well, puberty blockers is harmful to one aspect of broader transitioning when it assists in like 99 other ways, right?
So even for trans people, that yes, it may reverse their dysphoria, you're also signing them up for so much more. It comes down to like, again, the ethics of, do you believe, I'm just putting out there for all of you guys, not anyone in particular, do you believe a 12-year-old can decide to be sterilized for life? I don't think if you...
So, okay, we have the infertility bit. Jangles needs to talk about the infertility bit, and also it's not a 12-year-old making that decision. It's a 12-year-old with the, with the parents involved in that process and with medical experts involved in that process, right? That's another thing that needs to be talked about here to kind of like simmer down the tensions and make it sound like a less risky thing than they're making it out to be.
You took the word trans out of it, any sane person would say yes, but suddenly you put the word trans in it, and yes, 12-year-old Timmy can decide he never wants to have kids because he wants to be a girl. It's insane, sorry.
Jangles needs to address the infertility thing.
I'm going to go to one of the other reasons this has been in the news a lot lately, and
I don't think that's good.
I think for the most part, we seem to all agree, at least when it comes to adults, everybody's cool with people living how they want to live. as long as it doesn't impede on your rights, right? I think, are we all in agreement on that? So recently, this came into the news though, because in March, Leah Thomas became the first trans woman to win women's NCAA, did I get that right, sports people, championship in swimming. Should trans women be allowed to compete in sports with biological women?
If they've gone through puberty, no. And that's the difference. I mean, there are people who we've been talking about transition before or during, and I think that it's a bit different. But by and large, especially when it comes to adults, Leah Thomas is a very classic example of someone who should not have been competing against women. It's weird because suddenly you have to really care about women's sports, and it's not something I typically care about. I'm not trying to be offensive, I just don't. But I think that a lot of people support it just based on not wanting to be seen as someone who's unfair or excluding people. But the problem with that is obviously women are being hurt by that, at least women athletes, which again, it's not billions of people, but it's probably millions. So it's one of those situations that's not super black and white. I mean, you can have, I'm sure, a shitty trans woman athlete. It's not like it's always going to be someone she-hulking out, but it's more often going to be.
Yeah, so my stance on this, it really is a social question of whether we think that females should be able to have their own leagues to be able to compete in sports fairly. There's no rule written on the moon that says this is what we have to do. I happen to think that female athletes should have their own leagues and events where they can compete without biological males competing in them. And so once you say that, once you say, I think that females should have their own leagues free of males, then you have to say, okay, well, it's by definition exclusionary. And then you have to have your criteria of well, what are we going to exclude? And you can exclude biological males from this category. The history of sports right now, the reason we have men's and women's sports, and I do think a lot of gender ideology has gone in here and said that, well, men and women are these social categories now based on femininity and identity and masculinity and all this stuff, but really they were put in place because of the sex differences between males and females, and that really can't be ignored. So people who say they think that males should be able to compete in female sports, I mean, they're just saying that females shouldn't have their own leagues. They don't think that's a value that we should have. I happen to just disagree with that. If we want women to be able to compete fairly, there needs to be rules for exclusion, because if you don't have them, then it's no longer female sports.
Why do we have sex categorization in sports?
Because going through male puberty makes you a better athlete than
makes you a
not
better
going through
athlete.
male
Correct.
puberty.
Yes, I very much agree that we should still have this categorization. There are actual physical reasons
We're starting on a strong opinion.
would have this categorization, and I'm going to get canceled on lefts. Okay, see, I'm with you all. I do think that just identifying as a gender is not enough to be able to compete with your gender that you feel. That's not enough to compete in the women's league. However, the reason we have this sex categorization in the first place is not just because men are better athletes. It's not just because men are bigger. The reason is because pound for pound, men can be bigger and they can rather be stronger than women because they can put on more lean body mass, more contractile tissue than women can at the same body weights. That is the reason that the sex categorization exists.
See, this is good. This is what we needed before. Exactly this. Because you realize how here he's not just saying oh yeah, cis males and cis females, cis males are stronger. Even though that's true, and this is not a point that's particularly disagreeable, but I'm just using this as an example. He's not just saying that, okay, one's stronger and one's other, which is true, it's correct, but he's also explaining why that is. He's doing the mechanization, which I think he lacked a bit on the former part. This is good. We needed more of this before. And this is what makes you look really strong in the debates, right? Because if you can not only explain hey, or state that hey, this has the best positive effects, or this is bigger than this is whatever, but you can also explain the complex reasons for why it occurs in the way that it does, why we see those outcomes. That's really strong, and that's really important.
This can be addressed because the main reason that men typically have a lot more lean body mass than women, the main reason for that is the increased protein synthesis that they get from those higher rates of testosterone. And with hormone replacement therapy, it seems, really good. I want more research to come out, it seems to be able to pull that lean body mass down to something that is comparable when they are put with height-matched cis control groups. I think that we can, with more research, find the best possible answer to make everyone happy and with fair competition for everyone.
So there's currently two large meta-analyses, these review papers. They came out in,
I think this guy as well. This guy seems very reasonable from what I can see. I was really impressed by his philosophy of science understanding on the can you be born in the wrong body question. It seems like most of the understanding from this just comes from that one email he got from the teachers or whatever, being hey, or from the students, that this school is mixing up gender nonconformity with trans things. But apart from that, this guy seems pretty reasonable. Yeah.
2020 or 2021. These are longitudinal studies, so they actually look at individuals before transition and after. First, it goes and it quantifies the sex differences between males and females in various things like lifting weights, throwing a baseball, things like that. The average disparity between males and females is about 30%. Okay, when this is averaged out. The current studies we have, and maybe more data will come in that shows these aren't correct, but based on all available data from two review papers, the first author of one of them was a trans woman herself, showed that after 3 years of taking cross-sex hormones, that 30% gap is only diminished by about 5%. Okay, so there's still a big 25% gap between males and females. And so really just based on the current data that we have, it shows that it's just still completely unfair. And taking testosterone, if taking like a puberty blocker or cross-sex hormones, this doesn't just make you weaker. Like a female isn't just like a weaker man. They're taller. They have larger bones. They have connective tissues that are larger. And most of this stuff, your hand size, these things don't go away when you start taking cross-sex hormones. And these are absolutely part of the male advantage we see across different sports.
We do not have height categories because height
Good. He's stepping in here and he's directly addressing it.
is an advantage in some sports, but it is not deemed a significant advantage enough to warrant categorical separation. There's a reason we have weight categories in certain sports, but not height categories, because weight is a proxy for lean body mass, contractile tissue. The study that I think you're referencing, one of them, the one by Lisa Lippman, it did make a lot of these comparisons, but it made some, I think, pretty dishonest framing when they compared cis reference control groups versus trans women. It compared gross lean body mass. They had a lot more lean body mass than the cis reference groups, but they were also quite a bit taller, and taller people have more lean body mass. You have to match these control groups. You have to match these groups.
They've been matched.
They have been matched, and one of the studies that they did that, they saw that when you actually match for height, because again, taller people have more sarcomeres and series, they have more lean body mass. When you match them for height, the difference becomes much, much, much smaller than when you just use gross measures of lean body mass. It is close. I want more data. These were on untrained individuals, so I want to see what it looks like in practice.
That was a study by Deb, I can't remember the
This is
trans
good.
woman
He's doing really, really good in this section.
who did that study. I'm talking about the two review papers that collected all of these. It's Emma Hilton did those ones.
I'm sorry, I messed up. Emma Hilton and Lisa Lippman. No, my bad.
And you can do the
Yeah,
math
okay.
by looking
I was concerned. I was like, Lisa Lippman, did she do these studies as well? So it was somebody else. It was Hilton.
It's Emma Hilton did those ones.
I'm sorry, I messed up. Emma Hilton and Lisa Lippman. No, my bad.
And you can do the math by looking at how, if you control for body weight and height and all these things, still that 30% gap only diminishes about 5%, and even controlling for your height and your weight doesn't close that entire gap between males and females. So, I would say just based on the current evidence we have.
I think we all kind of agree we're just splitting hairs, right? We all kind of agree, right?
Well, I think both of them have said that the difference is smaller, but it still remains. I think it's important, like what that difference is. I think that's pretty important. So I think it would be cool for someone to say, okay, the difference, when you control for height is like 5%, and this is an untrained individual. So I think we absolutely can get to the point where, whatever, trans women can compete in women's sports and trans men can compete in men's sports and stuff like that.
Splitting hairs is where you get the nuanced best answers.
True. There's another area of public policy that's come under scrutiny, and that's what we do with transgender prisoners. Do they go to
that was all for the trans. That's unfortunate, because trans sports is Jangles. Jangles is really good at this because he has degrees on in I think it's biomechanics, which is basically what this is about, right? That's unfortunate.
prison for male or female. What do you guys think about that? I personally have mixed feelings about this, so I'm curious what everyone thinks about it.
You don't put penises and vaginas in a jail cell. That's pretty simple.
Thank you.
So the way to approach this is to argue outcome based, okay, so what evidence do we have of trans people, being predatory in prisons and them harming other people? Whereas what evidence do we have that trans people are harmed in prisons if they aren't able to go to the prison category with the gender to which they identify as? And when it comes to that research, the likelihood for trans people being predators towards other people is, I think it's either equal or I think it's lower than the average, if I remember correctly. However, their likelihood of being abused in prisons are significantly higher if they aren't able to go to the prison with which they're from the gender that they identify with. So now you need an outcome oriented thing here, because this is a hard mechanization thing to do. So here it works to just do outcome based, I think. And then explain why, okay, so what's your reason for arguing for a policy that's just going to get more people hurt and abused, right? And drilling it down to there. But I feel in the first segment, you could need more of an explanation as for how those outcomes are accomplished. But for this one, it's hard to really explain it.
There's something, and it's not the major topic of this panel, but I think it's something that I would ask everybody to tuck in the back of their minds and let it roll over in your minds over the next couple of days. There's a big problem that this conversation is not acknowledging. And that problem is mental health. And specifically, the number of people who have personality styles and mental styles that are engrossingly narcissistic, emotionally unstable, pathologically dishonest, predatory people. Predatory people are taking advantage of the designation trans, whether or not they're, quote, really trans or really believe it. We don't even need to ask this question. Leah Thomas is a perfect example. I don't know Leah Thomas. I can't diagnose Leah Thomas's mind, but I've been around long enough, and I know what I see in patterns, and I see the same pattern here. Leah Thomas is a man who thinks very highly of himself, who realized that if he called himself a woman, that nobody was going to be able to stop him at his height and his muscular build from doing what he did. And we are watching a lot of people who any honest person who is not afraid to tell the truth can look and say, this is a narcissistic liar taking advantage.
We got the psychoanalysis. Holy shit. He's going for it.
of gaps in our safeguarding, and we are acting like we can't see it, and we need to start talking about it.
So you think it's more...
That is just like a direct appeal to the audience. So, I mean, what can you say? It's just like a direct psychoanalysis there. Yeah, it's
reasonable. Leah Thomas's better explains, in your opinion, that it's a man who wanted to cheat at swimming to achieve all the fame and glory of women's collegiate swimming, and he's willing to go through a bunch of hormone therapy, change his body. I don't know about you. It wouldn't. No, I'm using your language here because I'm using your language. I respect language. So going through all this changes in their body, because it is a she. Call Leah Thomas she, please. No. So you will not. Okay, so you were lying when you said we all respect. We can all like live with each other. But what I was saying, like, it's more likely that.
Okay, so. Yeah, I think it's a good thing to. This was good. I think this is a good thing. To make that clear.
Person has just cheated to get all the glory of women's collegiate swimming. Then it was just a swimmer who actually was trans.
Yes, that is what I'm saying.
That's nonsense.
I think it's somewhere in the middle here. I think that it's.
Yeah. So once again, Jangles is missing a bit of mechanization, because I think the argument he's making here is reasonable. Because what he's saying is that what do we think is more likely? Because none of us know for sure. Do we think it's more likely that this person has specifically decided to upend their entire life, engage in a wide range of different medical procedures and treatments, completely change the way that they interact with the social world, change basically the most fundamental things about them that society recognizes, see how that affects all their relationships with their friends and their family, and that entire aspect of social life and all those medical things that are involved there, and basically turn their entire life on their head in order to win women's collegiate sports? Or is it more likely that this person is a swimmer and they're genuinely trans? Like, what is more likely? Because the risk, the analysis there leans towards it being more likely that they're actually just trans, as opposed to them subjecting themselves to everything that it entails to go through the trans experience when they're not really, which can include actually getting gender dysphoria, right? Because if you're not trans, if you're cis but you transition anyway, you can get gender dysphoria, right? Because you manufacture the exact same conditions that trans people experience without needing any specific thing to incur that. But if you're cis and you transition, you might cause gender dysphoria within yourself, because you're now living in a body that doesn't match your gender identity because you transition towards it, and that and all the social treatment and everything, all that means to be trans, just to do well in women's collegiate swimming. Or is it more likely that they're just trans and that they're a swimmer? I think that's a good point. I think you could have seen a little bit more of a longer elaboration to really point out just like emotionally just how silly this argument is.
Probably someone, this is just from observing the story, who perhaps does feel trans. Whether that's relevant or not, it depends on the person looking at the story, but it's also someone who fails to recognize their own reality. I think that you can be trans without going and stepping on people's toes about it. I think Leah Thomas should have automatically known it wasn't fair, just based on everything you can visually see and then all the science we discussed on the stage. So I think Leah's trans, but really fucking selfish, same time.
I think it's...
Do you not believe there are any predators who take advantage of where we're at socially?
Of course. Why do you need to punish all the people who aren't predators to accommodate for them? What happens to the...
This is the good answer.
Yeah, trans women who go to the male prison.
I'm sorry,
what happens to the trans women who go to the male prison?
Goes to what?
What happens to the trans women who have to go to a male prison?
First of all, a trans woman, I don't think in most circumstances should be in a men's prison. I don't think this is a good idea for either of the sexes that are in that prison. Am I misunderstanding your question?
So where do they go?
Pardon?
Where does a trans woman go?
That's a public policy question, but it's not the women's prison.
LGBT wards is probably the smartest decision, because
regardless of what we decide, the answer is not the women's prison, in my opinion.
So I think it's probably important not to focus on particular, what are Leah Thomas's intentions? What are the intentions of this one criminal who happens to be, who went into a female prison and raped somebody?
LGBT,
I think these are just...
I don't know about wouldn't you just have a trans woman in a trans men prison then? Is that that seems incredibly the gay jail? Yeah, what do you have? You have three people there? Yeah, I don't know. How would this even work? You can tell that he wants to hand wave that entire discussion by just saying that's a public policy question. It's a really strange way, of answering that question. It doesn't make much sense.
just, we can argue about someone's intentions, but you don't know the content of someone's mind. I would just focus on the fact that there needs to be certain safeguardings because there are people who will take advantage of loopholes, and these are the loopholes that we need to make sure we can close beforehand so that these types of people just don't have free reign in these areas. To me, that just seems like the logical area to focus on, not what are Leah Thomas's intentions. Are they consciously cheating? Is this male going to a prison, or do they just want to go in there so they can take advantage of women? What we need to focus on is making sure the safeguards are there so that it doesn't matter what their intentions are. They're not going to be able to get there in the first place regardless. So I think that's where we need to focus.
Before we open it up for questions from the audience, I wanted to ask the hardest question. How do you define woman?
An adult human female.
I mean, I'm genuinely asking.
Yeah, an adult human female, where female can mean someone with a gender identity that is opposite of male.
So that's where
Merriam-Webster.
That's where I will veer away from that because, to me, from a biological background,
This is okay. Hold on. Let me listen to that definition.
Adult human female, where female can mean someone with a gender identity that is opposite of male.
So that's where
Female can mean someone is. Yeah. So for my understanding, it seems way more valuable to because we know about the distinction between gender and sex. If we try to because the answer to what is a woman is whoever we societally classify as a woman, right? That's what a woman essentially is. There's no like metaphysical reality of what a woman is. And then the argument I would make is that we get the most social utility from having a definition of womanhood that includes trans women. And there you go. That's the way I would answer this question. I'm not sure I'm a fan of that definition because I think it's very important to reify the difference between gender and sex. And I think one of the best ways you can do that is by being very precise with our vocabulary. I think we should relegate the words, man, woman, to the concept and discussion of gender, and male, female to the concepts and discussion of sex. And I think it's good to keep those distinguished and to be very precise in our language when it comes to these two different things.
Merriam-Webster.
That's where I will veer away from that because, to me, from a biological background, male and female, these are terms that have definite meanings. Initially, maybe 2010 era, so long ago now, I think many of us were asked to make this distinction between male and female and being a man or a woman, and that being a male or female, this was biology, being a man or woman, well, that's gender identity. And I was largely on board with all of that. In hindsight, maybe that was the beginning of the slippery slope that has now led to where we are now, where people are saying, no, I don't just identify as the opposite gender, man or woman, I'm actually identifying as the opposite sex itself, and my identity defines my sex.
So when it comes to the sex, I think that what makes the most sense for me at the moment, I think it's absolutely possible to change your sex, right? Because if you think about sex, for all intents and purposes, why is sex recognized in society? Sex is relevant when it comes to things like your secondary sexual characteristic, your hormonal makeup, your genitals, stuff like that. That's why sex matters. And through transitioning, you can change like all of these things. So essentially, for all intents and purposes, functionally, if you have like an FTM person who has gone through like a full transition, I mean, they are female, right? Because for like literally everything about sex that matters in society, they're female, right? The only thing that's not the case is chromosomes, but literally like what role does chromosomes play in the way we socially handle sex? It doesn't. We use chromosome as a stand-in for those other sexual characteristics, genitals, hormone makeup, and secondary sexual characteristics that we think are important. And all those things can be changed for transition. So functionally, societally, somebody who has fully transitioned, they are also the sex to which they've transitioned to, right? That just seems to make the most sense when you understand stuff like this.
That is where I started standing up and talking about this because that's where the boundary between identity and biology was completely broken down. And that's something I won't let get broken down.
So I don't think that biologists or any kind of scientist, I don't think when they're starting their research, when they're beginning to conduct their study, they go look for basic terms in the dictionary. I don't think that that's a reasonable concern. I don't think Merriam-Webster defining woman or female a certain way is going to be that much of an issue. What I do take umbrage with is that I don't think that when people say trans women are women, they're not saying that trans women have XX chromosomes. They're not saying trans women produce large immobile gametes. I don't think that's what they're saying. So I don't see where this threat to biology comes from by including trans women under the broader definition of woman.
So I think the consequences are what we've talked about today. People like Leah Thomas competing in sports that are clearly designed for female athletes.
Did you say FTM people are female? Did I miss here? Maybe I misspoke. So what I'm saying is that if somebody's MTF, right, male to female, they're trans femme, okay? They're transitioning to be a woman. As soon as they socially transition, then they are gender-wise a woman. However, once they've gone through all the other steps of transition, right? Hormones, yeah, like hormone surgery and that, then I think they're also their sex is also female at that point, because sex and gender are different things, and functionally what matters, why we use sex in society is because it talks about things like that. That's what's functionally important in society, right? Genitals, hormone makeup, secondary sexual characteristics. That's what's important when we talk about sex in society. And all those are changed for transitioning. So for all intents and purposes, this person is now female, right? The only like female, or sorry, the only like, you know, male trait that remains are their chromosomes, which literally like like they don't matter like really at all. Yeah, because they are never visible. They only use as a stand-in for those other traits. I get your point. I just asked for clarification because what I heard you say contradicted. Okay, yeah, I hope we're clear now.
Prisons that are defined, clearly set aside for females. I think this a large, you know, cultural conversation we have of, you know, sex being blurred and being, we're telling people that you can identify your way into a sex category. I think that is eroding a lot of different areas where sex actually matters. We mentioned sports, we mentioned things like prisons. So I think that's an example of why, if we want to define a woman as adult human female, I think this is sort of the definition we've had from a long time.
So then you can be like, okay, yeah, you know, sure, there may definitely be people who are getting mixed up and are conflating the differences between sex and gender. So isn't it a really good thing that we might have then comprehensive gender and sexual education where we talk about these differences and make them really clear to broader society? And having these types of things is like a core part of, for example, school and educational curriculums. That's the way you want to segue that into something. And then you're going to be like, whoa, hold on. No, we can't have that, right? When that is the solution to the problem that he's talking about.
Time with the understanding that being a woman primarily requires you to be a female first, and then, you know, an adult human after that. So, you know, we can talk about what women should mean in different contexts, but I don't think we should be erasing of what the intent is in things like women's prisons and women's sports that are clearly not designed based on just your identity.
The reason those things are designed are to protect people. The reason we have men's and women's prisons is presumably to keep them protected. So I want to see some research about who's going to be the most protected. Yeah, close loopholes that allow like prisoners to say, oh, I suddenly feel like a woman. I don't think that would meaningfully happen. I think that would be pretty obvious. But also, like, let's see what the research says. I don't want to send. You only have two options in most cases. You're going to go to a men's prison or a women's prison. And for right now, I want to see the trans women. If they go to the male prison, they're going to get assaulted. Almost for sure. I think we can all like agree that that is a high likelihood of happening. So until we figure that out, until we see what the best option is, let them go to the women's prison. That's where a lot of them already go. And I want to see what the data comes out on that. Are they more violent than the cis prisoners? Are they more likely to cause problems? And is that what is the trade-off that we're willing to make for the other way, which is definitely the trans women are going to be assaulted a lot in prison?
Well, I would say we have. What about the women? Yeah. I mean,
that's what I'm talking about. The trans women and the cis women and everyone in between. That's what I'm talking about. I want all of them to be safe.
Sophistry with me.
What about the women? Yeah.
The trans women are going to be assaulted a lot in prison.
Well, I would say we have. What about the women? Yeah. I mean,
that's what I'm talking about. The trans women and the cis women and everyone in between. That's what I'm talking about. I want all of them to be safe.
Sophistry with me. What about?
Oh,
I'm as concerned as you are.
The audience on these panels are always so cringe. I swear to God, they clap at the stupidest shit. I cannot believe this.
About anybody being assaulted, but what I'm not hearing from you is, and you don't have to, but maybe you forgot. So you don't want to see them assaulted, so let them go to the women's prison until we can figure it out. What about the women who are in prison? What about the two women in New Jersey's Delamana prison right now who are impregnated? I don't even know if it was a sexual assault case, but there are many cases of...
What if it's not sexual assault? Why does it matter? Wait, if it was consensual... Hold on, this is so dumb. I swear to God. See, this is really telling here. Because it seems like what this person doesn't have a problem with assault, with breaking of consent, with things like rape or sexual assault. That's not their problem. Because in this situation, if he doesn't even know that there was assault or there was foul play or there was violation of consent involved, then what's wrong with that? Does this person think that all relationships in prison are wrong? So like if two gay men have a relationship in a prison, there's nothing wrong with that. As long as it's consensual, that's perfectly fine. If two women have a relationship, that's perfectly fine. Well, just because somebody's got like impregnated doesn't mean that it was wrong. For it to be wrong, it would have to be assault. That was really telling from him, because it's like if he thinks that's a problem, then his problem isn't with assault or predatory behavior. His problem is just categorically with these people being in prisons and having like interactions, normal interactions with like other people there.
Fully genitally intact males calling themselves trans women who are being put into women's prison, and there have been cases of assault, and some of them are psychosexual predators. if we care about that, what do we do for the women in there?
You separate the psychosexual predators from the general population like you do in prison already.
But even if it's not an issue of sexual predation, like, again, I said it so simply earlier because it really is that simple. You put a penis and a vagina in a cell and someone's in there for years, they're going to make babies. That's what's going to happen. So I don't think that it should just be, they shouldn't be in the men's prison, which I agree because that's obviously dangerous, but I don't think the default should be just a throwaway, like, yeah, they go in the women's then to cause problems there. I think the solution is...
So is it a problem with relationships, or is it a problem with pregnancy? What's the issue here? Because relationship, that's the whole thing, but then just make like contraceptives widely available. Like, yeah, I don't know.
LGBT wards, and yeah, maybe we have to have a conversation about funding for that, but maybe like government's spending our money on every fucking thing else. Why not just set up somewhere where everyone's safe and happy, or as safely happy as you can be in prison?
I'll add to that. I'm not sure it's true that we need to just sort of pretend that we don't have any reasons to believe that something could go wrong by introducing trans women to female prisons, knowing what we know about males in general, and trans women, they're biologically male. And, what's the reason we don't let people who just identify as men? Like, why shouldn't I go to a women's prison as well? There's no data that says I'm going to do anything. But we know, based on trends in males and females, that females have more to be concerned about in prison, from males being in there than vice versa. So this idea that, like, we just have to get data on whether trans women are actually a threat. I mean, we know that males are going to be more of a threat on average. And so this idea that we just
do we know that trans women,
the problem could happen.
Do we know that trans women are a representative sample of males? That's an assumption that you're making that seems very unscientific.
That's true. And then
we don't know if
we look at other things that we do know, like, for example, bathroom stuff, we see the same trend there, right? Where trans people, there's no evidence to suggest that they're going in there and assaulting people in bathrooms or whatever. However, if they are forced to go to the bathroom which they do not identify, they're at a higher likelihood of being assaulted there. So if that same trend holds through to prison as well, which there's no reason not to, then you reach the same conclusion there.
Sample, but I don't think the idea should be, well, just throw them in and see what happens. I mean, we have reason based on what we know about males to say from a position of some evidence.
So let's make fewer assumptions, gather data, and do what the data says.
But that data gathering requires just throwing males into female prisons. And
linking this to trans bathrooms is a really good point here for Jangles. Because it's a very comparable situation where the data is entirely in his favor. So
just seeing what happens, what sticks to the wall. I think there's reasons that females, even if there wasn't an increased threat, maybe they're just embarrassed. They don't want to be undressing or sharing spaces with the
there's also, if they send hold on.
Biological male. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why we could just say that, we have female prisons, we have male prisons. There's plenty of reasons why we wouldn't want any cross-pollination going on in there because, there's potential elevated threat levels. There's just the dignity of being around, a male if you don't want to undress around them. There's plenty of reasons we have.
I'm gonna give it to Blair. Part of this is this insistence on conflating trans women and women. They have to be the exact same thing. It's like this ideological fight rather than people just recognizing what reality is. It puts no sorrow or misery in my heart to know that you and I, Carrie, are different in many ways, trans being one of them. We don't have to have the same lane. We don't have to live the exact same lives and have the same experiences. Trans women are different than women, and that is a fact because they had to trans to become that. It's different. So the idea that one side thinks that the hill to die on is trans women or women, period, no nuance.
Yeah, but the thing is, okay, so these are two different things, right? Trans women are women, and trans women and cis women are not the same, are not contradictory. There is no contradiction in these two statements. This is like saying that this would be like saying that red is a color and red and blue are different colors. There's no contradiction there. Trans women are women, but trans and cis women, there's a difference between trans and cis women. But they're both women. Blue and red are both colors. There's no contradiction in this, in what she's talking about. The logic doesn't match up with what she is saying.
Nothing else, no further discussion, is wrong. It's not helping anyone, and it's creating situations like this.
So I can come in the middle of that, all right? So let's talk to me since I can't answer for all the SJWs out there. Yeah, trans women are different than women, of course. Of course that is the case. That's why you're right, that's why you had to transition. But on the other side of that, I don't think it's fair to say that trans women are the same as males. Right? That's why I asked you, are trans women a representative sample of males? Right? You're not the same as cis women, and they're not the same as cis men either, all right? We can acknowledge that there are differences, and we can discuss the nuances, rather than just simple platitudes like penis, vagina separate. Right? Maybe there's a little bit more to it than that.
I think appealing to bathrooms is really pertinent when it comes to the prison discussion.
So if we can give a round of applause for all of our panelists, we're going to open it up for questions. I'm sure that you guys have a lot of questions. We've got a microphone set up over here with Fritz. If you guys want to line up.
Oh God, got other questions. What are those differences? The difference is that one person was assigned woman at birth, and that worked for them, and they lived their life as that. And the other one wasn't assigned woman at birth. They transitioned. That's the difference.
All right, thank you. Please keep your questions brief, no long-winded life stories.
What's a meaningful difference between men and trans women? One of them is a man and one of them is a woman.
Do we have any evidence or studies on gender confusion or gender, and I'm not talking about just some occasional, homo activity, but gender confusion among other...
These fucking questions. I'm not talking about some occasional homo activity. Okay, dude. Oh god. Okay. Oh, this is always the best part. These questions are always the most crazy.
Confusion or gender, and I'm not talking about just some occasional, homo activity, but gender confusion among other animals, other creatures. Dogs, cats, or monkeys, or whatever.
I think we do for this, right?
Well, it depends on how you define gender. So there are some biologists who will define gender just as the basic differences in behaviors and preferences between different between males and females of a species. So we see like gendered behavior, but in order to know if there's like dysphoria or something going on there, if they have identities, this isn't something I think we can really ask scientifically, because you can't have them fill out forms and give you coherent responses that way.
Yeah, it's very difficult because gender is fundamentally a social construct, right? And I don't know how you would measure that in an animal kingdom, because humans just simply have like a way more complex social lives and social situations and social constructions than what any animal has the capability of having.
But we do see sex atypical behaviors, across different species. So we'll see certain male animals who are behaving more female typical and vice versa. Like dogs.
So I just want to thank all the wonderful panelists up here for being here today. I know you guys are enjoying this, so appreciate you guys. For the gentleman on the left here, all the information that I've seen, you claim that you care about what makes people happy and the well-being of human beings. Can you reconcile how years ago that we saw that there were extremely high suicide rates among transgender identifying people? It was close to 40% at one time. Now, since society
that's not true either. The 40% statistic was specifically for not suicide. Wait, hold on. Let me.
High suicide rates among.
Okay, yeah. So number one, 41% was never the suicide rate. These are not how many people killed themselves. These are how many people had a lifetime suicide attempt, is what that is. So number one, it's not the suicide rate, and number two, it's throughout the entirety of the lifetime. That's what that is. So those are two important clarifications. And what we know about that, well, we know things like, for example, transitioning and also social acceptance and good social treatment are the major. What's the opposite of a risk factor? Okay, I'll just do it the opposite. Not being able to transition and poor social treatment and discrimination and bigotry are the major risk factors, especially that treatment coming from family for suicidality amongst trans people.
Transgender identifying people, it was close to 40% at one time. Now, since society has made such great strides in being accepting of people who are transgender or identify as opposite gender than what they were born as, that number, the information I've seen is that number has actually increased over time. Can you reconcile that?
Sure. When you said the transgender suicide rate was 40%, right? Okay, well, that is incorrect. That's from a UCLA survey. And as far as I'm aware, with data collection practices, people who have committed suicide don't answer surveys without an attention rates. And contained within that study are people who are treated better, tend to... All right, here's the biggest predictor of suicidality, is connectedness, belongingness. In other words that are hard for me to say. How much more accepted now? They are more accepting now. All right, and things have gotten better for people with gender dysphoria. They absolutely have. Now, all of us...
I don't know if it's true that the suicide rate is higher. I haven't seen this demonstrated. All I do know for sure is that good social treatment dramatically lowers it and brings it in line with average populations pretty much.
In the past couple of years, may have had some mental health issues. Trans people are not just their transness, all right? They have to deal with COVID. They had to experience isolation separate from them being trans.
Okay, that's what they mean. Okay, that's a good piece of analysis there. Okay, all social suicide rates across the boards have risen recently, and obviously trans people are a subset of the population.
Yes, that's affirming their identities, created an affirming environment, created a supportive environment, drastically lowers their incidence of suicidality, drastically increases their feelings of well-being. It is arguably good for trans people.
There's no evidence that's higher now? Yeah, I didn't think so.
In that societal acceptance going up, rather than calling them males and refusing to respect how they identify.
Okay.
To engage
so I think
occasional home activity, that's got to be one of the...
One of the main issues is really, it's not really an inclusion issue, it's really an anti-straight issue going on, especially in the classroom. For example, I saw this chart that was given out to elementary school kids where it's a 0 and it's straight, and then it's 10 to you're gay. And as you go up and up the chart, it gets more rainbow. So having students be psychologically attracted to color and not gray, do you think it really...
I love these questions. So this is the argument that they're making right now, okay? The fact that LGBT has the rainbow, and the rainbow is colorful, and kids like color. The fact that the LGBT movement picked a rainbow is them indoctrinating kids to be gay because kids like the bright colors. And because the bright colors in the rainbow are gay, that's going to make the kids want to be gay. Why did you transition? So there was this chart with the rainbow on it. Oh, God. I mean, the way to respond is like, I don't think that like one chart having like being more colorful the more gay you become has any significant effect on somebody's likelihood to be gay. But yeah, that's
really has an anti-straight issue going on inside the classrooms than really an inclusion and the teacher saying, yes, there are gay people, there are trans people. Do you respect that? If you want more, ask your parents, rather than an anti-straight movement where it's 0 to 10 and then it gets more rainbow as it goes on.
I think there is a tendency for all
yeah,
the
Jangles doesn't even know what to respond to.
And social forces to be pushing people to be not just boring cis straight people like me. We constantly see this celebrations of people coming out as trans or coming out as gay, but we don't see similar celebrations if maybe they were to say, oh, actually no, I'm actually not trans anymore, or just kidding, I'm straight. It tends to be,
that's true to some extent. I think that's a positive thing. If somebody has like a period where they're unsure, they're questioning, whatever, bi-curious, gender questioning, whatever, and then regardless of what they my RGB lights turn me gay, whatever they come out with at the end of that period of time, it should be celebrated and should be respected. It should be the same thing, right? You had a period where you were unsure or whatever, and you've now reached a point where you're confident in your sexuality, your gender, whatever, and that's good, regardless of where it ends up at. And I agree that. And to be honest, it makes sense, right? Because if LGBT minorities specifically face a harder time in society and there are more pressures working against them, then them coming out is obviously going to be a greater feat, so to say, than somebody who is part of like a hegemonic demographic group or whatever. But yeah, regardless, it should still be positive to affirm all around. But I mean, it's not. I don't think it's a huge deal that like a disproportionate amount of attention is given to those groups that are minorities, right?
Actually, shame tends to be more common in response to those types of people. I did see a thing going around that had all the different flags for different gender identities. I don't know if I can't really verify it, but it was supposedly from a classroom thing, and you could select, what flag are you? And it had like a trans flag, and it had all these different ones. They're all colorful and cool. And then the cisgender one was just like shades of gray. And if you have like kids that are pointing out like, what are you? Like, who's gonna pick the cisgender? Like, I wouldn't pick it. Like, yeah.
God, the colors are turning my kids gay, dude. Fuck.
There's also a really huge segment of the population right now that is sort of restructuring social hierarchy based on
people with RGB graphics are generally more gay than... Oh, fuck. Oh, God. Guys, it's happening. Guys. Oh, God. I haven't even noticed. The LGBT agenda, guys. It's gotten to me. Oh, God, I'm in... It's on the front of my thing as well. Wait, hold on. Oh, I can't show you. But you can see the light reflect on what... You can't even see the light. You can see it on my phone. No. Wait, can you? Hold on. I don't know how to figure... Okay. And now I just don't... You see that? There's like a little line of more colors here. God. They're getting to me. The gay agenda. It's coming for me, guys. I haven't even noticed. That's why I've been making all this pro-LGBT content. My computer has been subtly making me gay all along with the RGB lights. God damn it. They got to me. Okay, let's keep it.
I think there's also a really huge segment of the population right now that is sort of restructuring social hierarchy based on these identities. So that's why you see straight white men at the bottom, black trans women are above white trans women, gay men are below them. So I think that's just the way a lot of people are...
Is that a weeb? Okay, now I have to defend myself because you accuse it of being a weeb, okay? It's not a weeb, okay? It's Mac Miller. Look, it's Mac. It's the Circles cover. You have the Divine Feminine, you have the Scuba Man, you have Matches, Pittsburgh, not Philadelphia. You got all that cool stuff. Yeah, it's a Mac Miller thing. It's not a weeb thing. Don't you dare fucking accuse me of that, Reeve. I almost banned you for that. Okay, chill.
Thinking about the world right now, which is obviously incorrect. Maybe not obviously to some people, but I think it's incorrect.
The status quo lacks saliency. You don't have to come out as a straight person. You don't have to come out as a cis person. It's assumed. All right. I have to come out as gay every time I meet a new person and they ask me to explain the wedding ring. All right. status quo, like say, they don't have to come out, they don't have to be celebrated because there was never any reason for them to not exist.
That's true, but I think a lot of kids see the celebration of coming out and identifying as a certain thing, and maybe they're kids that are not so celebrated in their life, and they want that, you know. So I think that's just one other reason in a long list of things that I think could be confusing kids and pushing them to
That's true, but I also would like to admit that.
I would like to see a longitudinal study on the effects of the LGBT flag and colorfulness on children's likelihood to identify as. That's what I want.
Transphobia and homophobia out there still. Kids see that as well, and it's just as important, probably more important, for us to like reassure those kids and tell their peers. You know, gay pride's not just for queer kids; it's also for straight kids who like will be their peers and shouldn't make fun of them. So maybe it's also really important to make sure that we are countering trans and homophobia, queerphobia in general.
I think this whole topic's so geographical too. Like it literally just depends where you live. So I have a lot of friends in LA that have kids in the school system, and the way you say that they see a lot of transphobia and homophobia, not really. Like in LA, it's not really like that. There's a much different culture. If there's a kid growing up in the Bible Belt, for sure, and that's 100% the point. But I don't know. I have a lot of parents in LA that reach out and say there's like 6 trans kids in my school, and they're all being pushed to identify this way. So it depends
Okay.
where you live. I don't think you really see the hatred if you live in certain parts of the country.
Yeah, obviously.
I kind of have a two-part question.
But on the whole, obviously, LGBT people, unless you're on Twitter, face even on some aspects on Twitter, but I mean, realistically, okay, like face overwhelmingly much more difficulties than what do non-LGBT people.
With Dr. John Money in the Reimer twin experiment, and to that point, him saying that gender identity is a social construct and it is an idea of nature versus nurture. I know you kind of alluded to it's kind of a combination of both, but can you give like a good critique of maybe why it being a social construct is not a good thing?
Oh, yes. So I hate the term social construct, not because it's not useful, but because everyone doesn't know what it means.
Okay,
and on all sides of this, all right? No one knows what social construct means. The left thinks that...
My sociology brain was like twitching there for a second, but he's...
Social construct means...
Whoa, hold on. Yo.
But because everyone doesn't know what it means. And on all sides of this, all right? No one knows what social construct means. The left thinks that...
You gotta chill.
Like
Jangles. I don't know about the...
Construct means it's completely arbitrary.
Okay, yo, what hand movements? Yo, calm down, Jangles, okay? You're on the wrong side, okay? Stop. It's a 1v4 already, okay? Chill.
Based on anything, and the right thinks kind of the same thing. So a social construct is just how genes manifest themselves in an environment. All right, it's how our brains respond to this. We're biologically social. So in the John Monnet experiments, I think it's Monet, right? Monet, or is it actually Money? Money, okay.
Money.
I'll try to make it fancier for him. So yeah.
So John Money is a situation where it seems like they actually induced gender dysphoria by transitioning somebody that didn't need transitioning.
He's had this idea that gender was a blank slate, it was all socially imposed, none of it was based in any sort of biology, which is obviously the opposite of what I'm arguing. And they had a little boy with a botched circumcision, and they raised him as a girl, and that boy developed what is inarguably described as gender dysphoria, because it is based on the brain. He wasn't conforming to stereotypes in terms of his behaviors, but there was something far, far deeper than that, and that was what was causing the distress. So I think that's a great example of how gender dysphoria can manifest itself, based on a guy whose research isn't talked about because he was kind of really, really wrong.
I also happen to have a two-part question. So specifically for you, just to lead up, do you immediately affirm a kid's decision to go trans?
Wait, what did he say?
Just to lead up, do you immediately affirm a kid's decision to go trans?
Do you immediately affirm a kid's decision to go trans? Okay, easy answer is to be like affirmation. Well, it depends on what we mean by affirmation. I mean, the main thing is that like, hey, we should go towards the appropriate which hopefully they exist, like social channels for a system. But
yeah. Talk to them. I want to see what they're talking about. Okay. That's what you do with any sort of like a psychiatrist. That's what you do with any sort of like gender affirming care. You talk to them, see what they're going, see what's going on, see why they feel that way.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just going to say the problem with that is there's so many therapists right now that are pushed for affirm only and are at risk of losing their job and being discredited as professionals because they don't affirm or being seen as transphobic or hateful. That goes for a lot of surgeons as well. So we keep removing the not the boundaries, but the prerequisites to being trans and it statistically being a good decision to transition because we're having these therapists that have to affirm these kids or they get fired or they get slander.
To be clear, gender affirming doesn't mean automatically, oh, you say you're a girl, I guess that's 100% true, let's get you some puberty blockers. No, there's a little bit more to it than that. The opposite of gender affirming would be like what's called gender confrontation or gender repairing. So automatically affirm, I say listen to them and use the language they want you to use, but continue to talk to them, and because this is a very complex subject.
The second question would be, why not at least try to affirm their biological gender first?
Because that's part of gender affirmative care. Ask them why they feel this way. It's not an either-or situation. You can do both. The important thing is to talk to the kid.
Hello, thank you guys for coming. Blair, you're more lovely in person than even on your YouTube videos, so absolutely. I guess for all of the liberal parents who want parent rights, like saying that you want to affirm your child's gender at 4 years old and say that they're trans, or say you're a conservative parent who wants the right to say that I do not want to have gay, trans curriculum discussions in the 3rd grade. Where do parents come together or should come together to have full rights of whatever that they want to do, or where do those rights end as a conservative parent or as a liberal parent?
I don't think the rights end at all. I think your kids are your kids, and any teacher or school system that's trying to take ownership over your kids is some communist bullshit. So the state does not own your children. I don't think the right ends at all. I think that's my problem.
I would argue just for greater school transparency, just so the parents know what's going on. If it's something that does not sit right with them, they can see that, they can remove their kids from a school if that doesn't sit right with them.
I have a question for you three. All right. A big argument against like the gender ideology in schools is that you don't want states imposing an ideology on children. And while I think that's a very disingenuous claim, I do think it brings up an interesting question. All right.
I hope what he says here is like the blindness to the status quo, right? Because it's not enough to just be like, oh, I don't want I don't want any type of gender or sexuality thing be kind of like coerced onto my kids. What you need to do to make the argument that you shouldn't have any type of like gendered or sexual education is you fundamentally need to argue that, hey, that like the hegemonic, the heteronormative, the cisnormative type of social structures we have, that they're positive. Because if you're just like, oh, I don't want anything influencing my kids when it comes to gender and sexuality, that exists in society. You have these, heteronormative and cisnormative like kind of structures that exist already. So it's not like, oh, if you don't have any sex or gender education, those pressures no longer exist. They still do, but you're only getting the cis and heteronormative ones. So yeah, that argument doesn't make sense there. You need to recognize that, hey, the gender and sexual education is to fight out and try to balance out and equalize and make non-partisan the views on gender and sexuality and stuff like that. The only way they can hold the argument is if they are like, okay, yeah, the hetero and cis-normative, that's the correct position to have. And that's okay. But then you're still in favor of kind of indoctrinating kids into that. But the argument that I don't want my kids to be influenced by anything, it's not true. They will be influenced. The question is just how they're going to be influenced. Exclusively cis and heteronormative, or a more like balanced kind of influence through sexual and gender education.
A kid, let's say a second grade kid, so what is it, 7 years old, shows up, last year in first grade, they identified as a boy, and now they identify as a girl in second grade. What does the teacher do? What pronouns do they use for this child who's now identifying as a girl?
I think they should ask the parents what they want their
parents are supportive.
What was that?
The parents are supportive.
Then I would ask that, if the teacher agrees with the ideology and wants to use those pronouns, then I think they would be able to. But I don't think we should have compelled speech on the teachers to use.
Okay, so if the teacher refuses, can we agree? They refuse to use this kid's new pronouns. That is an actor of the state, as a state employee, imposing their ideology onto that child. Can we have some reciprocation?
So yeah, he's bringing it into the domain of protected classes right now. How gender is part of protected classes, and we try not to let people discriminate or harass on the basis of protected classes, which misgendering essentially is, right?
It's more of a lack of participation.
Against compelled speech, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's more of a lack of participation in the ideology, not imposing a new one on the kid.
How about
Wait, no, it's not lack of participation. It's one idea. See, this is the key issue. People think the status quo is free of normativity. People think the status quo is just the way things are, and anything new, any type of social progress, any social activist movements, that is imposing something new. That's like brand new, that's now influencing things. That's not true. The status quo is an ideology. The status quo has these pressures. The status quo has all these influences here, there, and everywhere, right? It's not like, oh, right now we have no influences, that somebody who isn't like, pro-trans is abstaining from any ideology. No, they're just part of the cis-normative ideology. That's all it is. Everyone is part of an ideology. All societies have an ideology. So this argument that like, oh, it's just an abstaining, it's just a refusal to participate, it's not anything else. That's wrong. You're participating in one ideology, you're taking a stance, but it's just like which stance you take.
Intentionally. This is a little transfer. They intentionally call the kid he as intentional. Does that constitute?
I mean, anyone who's purposely trying to go against or hurt a child is a piece of shit in any direction, but I think that it's whatever the parents want at the end of the day, and the teacher should abide by what the parents want.
I just say this really quickly. I'm hearing, and I get that we're on the other side of this, but I'm hearing a lot of this definite, this is a trans child, you should use the language they want, use the language they want. No, I don't believe that because a child says this is what I want, that creates a moral parenting duty on us to do exactly what they want. I think we have to negotiate these things, and I think there are going to be different, I don't even know the answer to, I don't know what I would say to your question, but yes, I know you think that's very troublesome. I can see that. But I don't think we should be led by children.
Yeah, that is a troublesome thing, right? Like, how do you deal with these kids who are experiencing this thing? Like, yeah, it's a very significant thing, and it kind of demonstrates that, like, hey, these people don't often have the best interest of everybody in mind, right?
And I don't think that that's crazy.
I can't believe somebody can get applause for not having an answer to like I don't understand how that. Yeah, I'm losing my mind. I hate this audience.
Thank you for being here, but doesn't this kind of come down to a discussion of self-actualization and really what we, like, the way that we view ourselves and coming to some understanding of our place in the world? And the reason I'm asking that is because does it help to use terms like happy as the ultimate goal for our existence here on the planet? Like,
and then there's also the topic of like bigotry and parents and stuff like that. Like if you have non-accepting parents, does that mean that the parents are correct, you know, no matter what their opinions are? Like it's just...
Conflicts here is that we assume that like in Blair's condition, is she happier because of the transition, or is she more fulfilled, and happiness comes from that fulfillment? Like the reason I'm saying that is because it could be happy for some kids to be affirmed, and then non-affirming others would create happiness for them. It just depends on your position of what happiness is.
Yeah, it's complex.
I know, but
So ask them, talk to them, see what's going to work best for each individual child. Go beyond just are you happy or not. That's why you have a psychiatrist. That's why you have an entire team of people who are going to talk to you, psychologists, understanding where you're coming from. So we can figure out what does happy mean. What can that mean to this kid? And they can't talk to you. So.
Hi, Blair.
Good answer.
So I just want to come here and say Shane Dawson didn't do anything wrong. Okay.
What the fuck are these? These questions? Jesus. By the way, Zoe, all the intro clips from these questions.
I'm not sure if this is common knowledge or not, but data says that the human brain stops developing at age 25, and I know that for a fact because I'm 27, and yeah, I'm going to...
And 2 years ago, I stopped growing. I never cringe. The last 2 years, nothing that I cringed at, okay? Everything before then, all cringe. But at 25, that's when it stopped.
So I was thinking legislators brought to something when they raised the drinking age from 18 to 21, and I think we should start thinking in the same way when it regards to transitioning. I was thinking, like, would it be beneficial for the trans community as a whole to delay the transitioning process to at least 21 and maximum 25?
I don't know.
The issue with that is that it becomes... That's a long period of time, first of all, where these people might have to suffer. Number two, their ability to transition after that point is going to greatly depend on what types of medical interventions they had access to before the time period of 25. So that's not very good. Yeah.
No, it's so difficult because that's also another geographical question. It's like 16 as an adult in some places, 18 other places, and then all of a sudden...
Wait, how's that geographical? Okay, the last one I agree when she said it was a geographical question, because there's a massive rural-urban divide in America when it comes to social values. But when it comes to like things like at what age are people responsible enough to do these things, how is this a geographical divide? It shouldn't be a geographical divide. There should be a divide on what you believe is the reasonable age for somebody to do this.
You know, drink until you're 21, but I think 18 is generally where I feel the safest, because at 18 you can get any other kind of surgery. You can go and seek any other kind of medication. So for me, 18 feels safe, but I am aware that it's like a very nuanced question. And
Didn't Blair literally say like half an hour ago that she knew that she was trans and everything at like 4 years of age? When did Blair transition? Did anyone know? And I don't like using like, you know, her experience like against her or whatever, but I think it's relevant. But yeah, she did. Yeah, I know she mentioned the 4-year-old thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean she started to transition. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
And then yeah, at 18 your brain isn't fully developed, but I mean, you have the legal rights to do so many other things. Why not surgery? I don't know.
Hello. I would like to thank you, sir, on the far left, for coming and expressing your ideas here. Very beneficial. We want to make sure that we don't, you know, see any...
That guy didn't fucking clap. Blair clapped. Moderator clapped. Red guy clapped. I saw audience members clap a bit. He didn't clap. He didn't want it.
An echo chamber, and that our ideas are challenged a little bit. The other thing, a question I want to ask you is, are you aware of what actual Lupron is? The drug Lupron, are you aware of what it is?
No.
Okay, Josh, can you please define like what Lupron is used for as far as rapists and stuff like that is concerned?
Thank you. Where might be better?
As far as rapists? Is that what he said?
Lupron is a drug that is used, I believe, to treat some prostate cancers. I believe it may also sometimes be used to treat severe endometriosis. I don't remember what it's FDA approved for, but it's a very strong drug that is not supposed to be used.
Very strong drug. Like what? This is such a useless thing. Like any drug can be harmful in any amount. What is that? What does a strong drug mean? Like if we already have a metric, then we can say something strong. Like okay, if we're metric, we're determining here is like, you know, what's it called? Like pain. What's it called? Like pain dampening. Then obviously we can be like, okay, morphine is stronger than ibuprofen, right? You can do that, but like a strong drug in a vacuum literally means nothing, because it depends on the amount, like what effect are we talking about, like for what case? What treatment are we talking about? Yeah, like.
If I remember correctly, for more than 6 months in some cases because of its long-term effects. And it has the
Wait,
effect.
what did you say?
If I remember correctly, for more than 6 months. It's a very strong drug that is not supposed to be used, if I remember correctly, for more than 6 months in some cases because of its long-term effects. And it has the effect of literally stopping the puberty if you give it to a child before their puberty happens. So it's a very hardcore drug.
A hardcore drug stopping the puberty. So I don't know if he's just being imprecise with his language, but if it's a puberty blocker, it doesn't stop it. It pauses it, right? There's a key difference there. But
you may know more.
It is used to treat cancer, and there are no long-term studies on what a person's life and health profile looks like having gone through that at 12, 13, 14, the ages where they take them, and how that affects them long-term. So that's another reason why there are so many ethical questions to be raised.
All the evidence we have right now doesn't seem to be that there are any like super severe long-term effects on puberty. I don't know about Lupron specifically. The fact that they're singling out one specific puberty blocker makes me a bit suspicious. But from what I've seen from puberty blockers at large, it doesn't seem to be any significant negative. There are some side effects, of course, like with every treatment, but nothing like they're making it out to be. You know, I think the infertility point is something that Blair brought up multiple times, and that doesn't seem to be true from what I know.
Because in many ways, these kids are guinea pigs. We don't know what it's like to have a kid on these medications for life and go into adulthood yet.
And we never will if we outlaw these kind of treatments. So
that's not a good argument to make. That's he's gonna get thrown apart from this. He's gonna be like, oh yeah, sure, we won't know what the long-term effects are for giving our kids heroin unless we give an entire generation of heroin. Like, that's gonna be the argument that they're gonna make now.
Answers would be, do you know?
That's true, but again, so the good line for me is like, do you think a 12-year-old can decide to sterilize themselves? To me, at the conversation, I don't know why enough people don't bring that aspect of it up. To me, that's just the line. Like, can you decide to not have children for the rest of your life at age 12?
What are the side effects? I think there are some things about height and bone density. I think there were some things there, but yeah.
I don't think any child can.
And I think it should be done in a controlled setting with some trials. You know, it's not just like, let's just unleash it on the whole population first and then
But what about what they do to rape them and stuff like that?
Oh, actually, yes. Historically, it was used to chemically castrate pedophiles as well.
This is the chemical that you know as chemical castration that used to be done to sex offenders. I don't know, was it Lupron?
Okay, hold on. Does Lupron cause infertility? Wait, hold on. So it can lead to things such as infertility in women. It's entirely possible that Lupron specifically causes infertility, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the only puberty blocker, right? Lupron is injectable fertility. Wait, hold on. So to prevent premature ovulation. Oh, it's just down here. Lupron is most often used to treat endometriosis and uterine fibrosis in preparation for surgical treatment or in women with infertility as their main problem. It's used to treat infertility? I'm not sure. Lupron is one of the best known and most hated of IVF treatment injectable fertility drugs. From what I'm reading, it seems like this is it stimulates ovulation. It's off-label use. It has been part of fertility treatments in many years. I would need to read into this specifically, but this, I don't know what they're saying is weird. Joshi Rose being a heavy lifter in the stream come with you. Thank you very much, Lawson. I appreciate it, and I hope that's true. Okay, yeah, I don't know what this is. It's number one, it's not the only puberty blocker. Number two, even what they seem to say doesn't seem to be very clear from just a little Googling I've done. But once again, I haven't looked into this a lot. So it might be true what they're saying, but it seems strange. Hold on. Lupronus is a manufactured version of a hormone used to treat prostate cancer, breast cancer, and early puberty, chemical transfer balance, part transfer hormone therapy. It is given by injection into a muscle under the skin. Include hot flashes, unstable mood, trouble sleeping, headaches, and pain at the site of the injection. High blood sugar, allergic reactions, problems with the pituitary gland. Pregnancy may harm the baby. Does infertility appear? Infertility doesn't even appear a single time here. Maybe fertility. Okay, here we go. It may be used for precocious puberty in both males and females and to prevent premature ovulation cycles and control ovarian stimulation for in vitro fertilization. Yeah, from the cursory Googling I've done, it doesn't even seem like this makes you infertile. But once again, heavy grain of salt here. I haven't looked into this before what I just did right now in front of you all on stream.
Was chemically castrated?
Yes, it was used to castrate pedophiles. It's used to treat cancer, castrate pedophiles, and stop puberty. Again, using it for more than 6 months can raise a lot of problems. So yeah, like you said, it needs to be in controlled settings, not, okay, this is the roadmap for the entire population that comes in and expresses gender dysphoria, which, by the way, a lot of fucking kids grow out of. I'm so sorry I swore, but a lot of them grow out of it, and you're removing their body parts and sterilizing themselves before they have a chance to.
All right. I just want to thank you all for coming. Texas is my first time being into an event like this. My dress like this, didn't know what to wear.
So a lot of people grow out of it. From what I remember, a lot of that research isn't actually kids diagnosed with gender dysphoria. It's just gender non-conforming kids. It's just like the sample size is just a bunch of kids who are gender non-conforming, and then a lot of people take that study and run with it and be like, see, most people grow out of being trans, but that's not it. Most people just don't end up transitioning and are just gender non-conforming, which is funny. That might not be the study she's referencing. To be fair, she might be referencing something completely different. But from what I've seen, a study a lot of people will reference is the one where they have a cohort of gender non-conforming kids, and few of them end up transitioning, and they're like, see, most kids who they say, oh, most kids grow out of being trans, when that's not true. Most of the kids in the sample size aren't like trans, they're just gender non-conforming. You don't have to be gender non-conforming, or you don't have to be trans just because you're gender non-conforming, right? And they will use this to be like, see, most people grow out of being trans, whatever that means. Which is funny because in this panel, they were railing against the entire conflation of gender nonconformity and being trans. So that's pretty funny. If that is the study she's referencing, although I'm not sure.
But I want to go back to the same-sex prisons to kind of keep, I guess, control on male prisons where you don't have a transgendered male or a male to female trans woman in a male prison. And I just wanted to understand, are we not ascribing the same logic to eunuchs? Because to me, those are also emasculated men. Sorry, those are also emasculated men that, I mean, would be more prone to a sexual assault inside of an isolated room with another inmate.
Well, that's difficult. I mean, I guess hypothetically a eunuch could fall under that in certain circumstances, but I think the bigger problem is like, you know, there are trans people that actually do transition, believe it or not, a lot now don't, but the ones that do, you can't just put them in a male prison, they're clearly going to be raped and beat. That's like just a no-brainer. You can't put, like, men have sex with each other, and they're not even gay in prison because there's nothing. Imagine if you like throw a trans woman in, it's going to be an issue, regardless.
Oh, hello, how are we doing? Blair, you look fabulous. You're giving Carrie a run for her money, but nobody outshines like Justin over there on the far left. I just want to ask a question, and I just want to see a quick show of hands, and then I'm going to ask like a second question once you guys get more detail, but I want a quick show of hands. Should a father who has a child with cancer who needs chemotherapy to live be able to refuse chemotherapy on his behalf? Okay, now should a parent who has a trans child, who this child identifies as trans, all the doctors agree this child is trans, all the doctors agree that puberty blockers are probably best for this child, should that parent be able to interfere on that child's behalf and refuse treatment for their gender dysphoria? False equivalence.
It is a false equivalence. And
yeah, the cancer example is not a good example to pull from here. I can see why somebody might think it's similar. You know, chemotherapy, important drug, also very severe side effects, but as opposed to literally dying, you know, compared to gender dysphoria, which you can end up dying because they might not get the treatment that they need, and because of that, the gender dysphoria might drive them to a point of suicidality. But it's less direct, and it's going to turn a lot of people off. The best example to pull here, okay, and this is, I think this is a perfect equivalency pretty much, is SSRIs. I think that's a really good example, and in the treatment of depression, because SSRIs are similar. There isn't like a metric ton of research on SSRIs, and there are positives and negatives, and they have very significant side effects to them. However, for adolescents that suffer from, for example, depression, like major depression, should their parents be allowed to prevent them from preventing their kids from being prescribed SSRIs if the doctor thinks it's the best choice of action? That's a way better question. I think that's a perfect equivalency there, because the amount of research is the same, the severity of the condition is very, very similar to the same. The side effects and stuff of the drugs are very, very similar. SSRIs and treating depression is way better an equivalency to draw here than what is cancer and chemotherapy. So next time, do that one instead of the cancer one.
I don't agree with the premise because I don't think cancer is the same thing as gender dysphoria, which, like we said, there's a lot of studies that show up to 80% of kids grow out of it. You're not giving them the chance by putting them on medication. And also, it's a lot of emotional manipulation happening. This whole line of, would you rather have a dead kid or an alive trans kid, as if that's the only two options. Your kid is going to kill themselves if you don't sterilize them. That's emotional blackmail against parents. The situation is not that dire. I'm transgender. I've never had a suicidal ideation or thought.
That's so dumb. Oh my god, Blair, how can she say this? Just because I cannot. This is such a... She even knows how dumb this is, right? Obvious. It's not like, oh, your kid is literally going to kill him. Like, you don't have to do super intense. But saying that, oh, I never had any suicidal ideations, despite being trans, and I experienced X, Y, and Z hardship. It's so insensitive. It's so silly. Just because you were able to get through something and you weren't like suffering like significant mental anguish or suicidality or whatever, doesn't mean that's not true for other people. This is such a... Yeah, I don't like that. That was disgusting. I didn't like that at all.
In my life, and so this narrative, again, a lot of these suicide statistics also come out of activist groups that serve to gain off having the statistics be heightened. I don't think.
The suicide statistics are most often cited by conservatives who are like, see, it's a mental disorder. Look how often they kill themselves. Like that. That's like, oh my, this is, Jesus, this is the worst dialogue, the worst monologue I've heard in this entire debate so far.
It's just one of two options. I don't think your kid's dead or your kid's trans. I think simplifying it to that doesn't do anyone any favors.
Okay, Blair, if I have a trans child who is depressed, who is anxious, who has suicidality, who has suicidal thoughts,
I think you fight the suicide. I don't think you have to fight the gender part.
Yeah, SSRIs is such a way better example of this because it gets rid of all of these responses that they're coming up right now.
Huh? How do I fight the suicide?
I mean, I don't know how you fight suicide. I'm not educated on, fighting back against suicide.
It's not a question we can answer for you.
Yeah, it's different, and every situation is different. And again, reducing it to dead kid or trans kid is false.
I have two very, very short, quick questions. One to Josh, right? Earlier, you intentionally misgendered Leah Thomas. Would you do the same thing to Blair White? Because she's sitting right next to you.
Oh, no, here we go.
The question is to, I don't remember your name, Colin? Yes.
Oh, shit.
He said that dysphoria was a necessary component in order to identify someone as being trans. But if someone has transitioned, they've got all the surgeries, they've got all the hormones, and they no longer experience dysphoria, what do you call that person? Do you still call that person a trans person since they're no longer experiencing dysphoria? Or?
Well, it's like if you have depression or something and you're taking...
No, let the other guy answer! Oh, fuck, he needs
medication. I mean, you have to maintain the medication, otherwise you'll presumably go back to being depressed or something. So it's, yeah, you're receiving it even though if your dysphoria goes away. I would say you're still trans because you're receiving a certain treatment.
So it's a treatment that makes somebody trans? It's not... Okay, I don't think this person's thought through this very hard. Because a lot of people say, oh, gender dysphoria makes you trans, but you can essentially cure gender dysphoria, right? You wouldn't say that somebody... Yeah. This is like a weird way of phrasing it. Like if you aren't affected by gender dysphoria anymore, defining that person by the gender dysphoria is a bit strange.
Ongoing. And then I'd also like to add one thing. I've been in the trans community long enough to know that transition is not a cure for dysphoria. It is, in certain situations like mine and like other people I know, a great help for it and can reduce it greatly. But I don't know a single trans person that has zero dysphoria left after.
So because transitioning isn't the entire puzzle, and now I might have oversimplified and said transitioning cures it, which is not true. Transitioning is part of the puzzle towards resolving gender dysphoria in an individual. Transitioning on its own gets us some of the way there, but not all the way there. Social acceptance and interconnectedness and stuff like that, that's extremely important. If not even more important, I think, than just the transitioning thing. But the transitioning thing is important in its own. So it's all part of the puzzle towards resolving it. Transitioning on its own won't get you all the way there.
Transition, especially because there's varying
This guy's stressing out now. He's like, oh, fuck, how am I going to deal with this?
Successful transition. So I don't think it's that black and white.
I'm glad you actually asked that question. It's something I thought about actually before.
Oh, God. Oh, poor Blair. You can see with her body language, she's like, well, this is how it goes.
black and white.
I'm glad you actually asked that question. It's something I thought about actually before you and I met.
Thanks for turning it into a personal conversation.
No, this is actually interesting. I'll answer the first part first, and second part second. I didn't misgender Leah Thomas. I correctly sexed him. Second part of this. I'm sorry. Say again. Excuse me. It's not your turn, sir.
And thanks for signing me up for this conversation too, by the way. Love it. Love it.
This is something I thought a lot about because I will not do compelled speech. And whether you agree with me, telling the truth is a very important moral value to me, and it has a lot to do with why I do my show and why I talk about the subjects I do. But I'm also a gay man who remembers when I was younger that we had people like you, Blair, and people who simply dressed in a certain way, or men who were more feminine. We all automatically said she for them or he for the butch lesbians who were like that because we were part of a community.
I will correctly gender people that I like. That's what he's saying right now.
Cared about each other. And in those days, because I don't actually like to make people feel bad, I wouldn't get up in Blair's face and say, I want to make you feel like I don't respect you. I don't want to be mean or cruel, but I won't accept the dichotomy that in order for me not to be mean and cruel, that I have to do something that I genuinely believe is lying about the truth. This is a tough issue. I don't know how to answer you better than that, but that's how I feel.
And also,
so he didn't answer the question, basically. But yeah, essentially, that's what he said. I won't misgender people I like. That's what he said, essentially. But he also didn't give a direct answer. Oh, my God.
No one's compelling you. I'm not sitting here. We interacted before this. No one's compelling. Exactly. But the interesting thing is this gentleman clearly wanted there to be some revelation of animosity and clearly wanted you to be consistent with it. And so that was a... Right, exactly.
Have we considered...
That's the most tense, awkward interaction I've... Oh, Jesus Christ.
That's the trans... Wait. I would assume that's the trans ally, right? Who basically just set the trans woman up on stage to have someone possibly do that. Just saying. Right, clearly.
Have we considered that this might
be... To be fair, that is a pretty... That's a bit of a... I don't know if I would have asked that question. Probably wouldn't have, but... Well, it was asked, and... Yeah. Jesus Christ. Yeah, essentially that's what he said. I'll misgender you depending on how much I like you. Like that's essentially what his answer was. But he also didn't directly answer it.
Drug companies just looking for more business.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
Wait, what did he say?
Have we considered that this might be motivated by drug companies just looking for more business?
I can't do it, dude. Oh, man. You know what I think, guys? I think all of the trans communities online are just deployed by IKEA to sell more blue plush sharks. That's what I think. Do you guys agree? I think all of transgender ideology is just IKEA manufactured to sell their blowhigh more. That's what it is. And thigh highs. Yep, thigh high manufacturers. They did they also manufacture this whole transgender ideology thing. Yep. That's what I think it was. Now, obviously, mine's a bit more silly than theirs, but just because there's like something financially benefits somebody doesn't mean that they propagated it or they created it or this is like employed by them or whatever. Incentives line up in all sorts of like weird ways, generally societally, but just because an incentive lined up in a convenient way doesn't mean there was that person that caused that thing. It's obviously very silly. That type of thinking gets you to some really strange conspiracy places, whatever, COVID, 9/11, whatever we talk about, you know? But yeah.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
Is COVID just a scam? Yeah, exactly, like COVID stuff.
Thank you guys so much. We're going to wrap it up. Yeah, we're going to have a short break before the next panel, I believe. Yeah. And just a round of applause for our panelists again. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Oh boy. Strong point. The trans people in sports, that was really good. The last half was decent. The first half, however, I feel like the main thing, if I could tell one thing to Jangles, is that sometimes just appealing to results isn't enough. You're right, you're correct, but it's not always enough to do that rhetorically. An excellent thing to do, the best thing to do, is to not only be able to refer to results and facts, but also explain why it shakes out that way. That's also extraordinarily important. And being able to explain that just makes your argument sound so much better and gives everyone a better impression that you know what you're talking about. Even though you're right either way, being able to explain and understand it makes you more right and gives you a better understanding. And we were missing that a bit in the first part. Which I think that would have made it a lot better. But yeah, that's probably what I'd say. Drug companies after inventing trans people, yeah. True. Yeah, drug companies that have existed for like literal centuries, but yeah. Okay, I think I'm going to talk to Jangles about this some other time, but I think that's probably about it for this stream. Before you guys leave though,